And welcome to review session for Tuesday, February 21, 2017. Ms. Harris, if you will.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. As the Vice Chairman said, today is Tuesday, February 21st, 2017. This is the City Planning Commission review session, and a quorum is present. The first item on the agenda is a proposed Department of City Planning initiated zoning map and zoning text amendment to create a new special coastal risk district for the Broad Channel community. And I'd like to introduce Melissa Hurlitz, who is making her first presentation today before the commission. But before Melissa speaks, Michael Morello, who's our Director of Waterfront, will provide an overview of these efforts.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. As Ms. Harris mentioned, we are going to be talking about two zoning actions that we are taking for Broad Channel and Hamilton, or proposing to take for Broad Channel and Hamilton Beach. But in order to provide the appropriate context, I'll first be talking about the work of our resiliency program more broadly and how these two projects relate to that. This is an outline of the presentation. I'll be speaking first, and Melissa will be speaking second. So to begin, as you likely recall, earlier this fall, Dan Zerli, the Senior Director of Climate Policy and Programs in the Mayor's Office, spoke to the Commission about the work of his office as well as the work of the city as a whole. And that presentation focused on One New York, the plan for a strong and just city, and outlined the city's approach to resiliency. To protect the city from flooding, the city pursues strategies of multiple lines of protection. This includes coastal protection, including such projects as the Coastal Protection Project on Staten Island and actions which came before the Commission just a few weeks ago. Improving the dunes on the Rockaways, as well as a project that will be coming before the Commission in the future for the East Village and the Lower East Side. The other multiple lines of defense also include infrastructure elevating and hardening, including the hardening of DEP's facilities, as well as many assets not directly under city control, but for which the city is working with private sector entities. And then as well as the resiliency of buildings and making certain that our building stock is made more resilient. And this includes both working on building code issues as well as zoning. And Dan spoke about how the Department of City Planning's work is central to all of this. As the Commission knows, the Department of City Planning has been working on these issues for several years. Immediately after Hurricane Sandy, the city issued a mayoral executive order in 2012, which provided for emergency relief from zoning for projects that were building back immediately after Sandy. That was followed with a citywide flood text in 2013, which I'll explain in just a minute. But it's important to recognize that that citywide flood text in 2013 was done as an emergency proposal and had a sunset clause. That project will sunset 1 year after the adoption of the new FEMA flood maps, which I'll talk more about in a minute as well. Following the 2013 citywide flood text, in 2015, we also passed, and the City Planning Commission passed, the special regulations for neighborhood recovery. These were to provide additional zoning relief to expedite recovery, which I'll talk about further as well. We are now proposing local rezonings for Broad Channel and Hamilton Beach, and a proposal for a portion of Staten Island will be coming later this year as well. But we anticipate a follow-up to the citywide zoning text amendment in 2018 to make permanent that first flood text, which, as I mentioned, had a sunset clause, and to take the lessons learned from the past now 4.5 years and apply those to the zoning code. To give a brief overview of the 2013 flood text, here's what is allowed. We increased the height limits of all buildings in the floodplain by allowing the height to be measured from the design flood elevation, which is that FEMA reference standard plus an additional level of what we call freeboard, and in some cases to a higher reference point that is, in essence, lifts the entire envelope of the building up to correspond to the new flood insurance, the new flood map requirements. We also allowed for a discounting of floor space when lost in order to come into compliance where the latest building standards for such things as raised entries, mechanical spaces, and flood areas are required. We allowed for the retrofitting of older buildings, overriding typical zoning rules for non-complying and non-conforming buildings, as well as established design standards requiring elevated buildings to mitigate their impact on streetscape. And then in 2015, the City Planning Commission passed the Special Regulations for Neighborhood Recovery. And this was intended to help speed the recovery from Hurricane Sandy in select neighborhoods where we had acute problems. And this was done by simplifying the process for documenting non-compliances for Sandy-damaged homes, removing disincentives for property owners to make resilient investments, and establishing a new zoning envelope, particularly for narrow lots, that reconstructed homes are to more accurately reflect the existing cottage neighborhood character. While all that work was going on, we were also working on a series of resilient neighborhood studies. They include projects in all 5 boroughs: Harding Park and Edgewater Park in the Bronx, Chelsea and West Chelsea and the East Village Lower East Side, 2 bridges in Manhattan. I'm sorry. The East Shore on Staten Island, Sheepshead Bay, Garrettson Beach, and Canarsie in Brooklyn, and Hamilton Beach, Old Howard Beach in Queens, as well as Broad Channel in Queens, as well as Rockaway Park and Rockaway Beach, also in Queens. These 10 study areas are intended to help us provide lessons learned that would inform the citywide flood text that we anticipate moving forward in 2018. And we anticipate that most of the issues raised in other areas will be addressed through the citywide flood text. We also intend that the overall approach to land use for coastal areas in the city will be informed by these studies. And most relevant to today, we've identified the need for near-term zoning changes that weren't resolved through the citywide flood text, and that includes Broad Channel, Hamilton Beach, and the Staten Island East Shore. This is a map showing the current flood zone for the city of New York as defined by FEMA in the 2015 preliminary flood insurance rate maps. And this is the 100-year or the 1% chance storm event in the city. And it's a very large geography. It includes roughly 400,000 residents and 71,500 buildings. Within this geography, new development is required to be elevated and flood-proof by building code. And our general approach is to make certain that zoning does not inhibit these design measures. But there's also a very different type of risk that we face. Though much smaller in geography, several neighborhoods will face the risk of daily tidal flooding. This map shows areas where daily tidal flooding, that is to say, each high tide cycle, so that's twice per day, there will be low-level flooding in these neighborhoods. Much of it is currently marshland, and I'd point out that some of the areas around Jamaica Bay include undeveloped marshland, as well as portions of the west shore of Staten Island, particularly around Fresh Kills. But some of it does include inhabited areas as well, including the areas that we'll be talking about today, Broad Channel and Hamilton Beach, as well as a portion of the east shore of Staten Island, which will be protected from daily tidal flooding with the Army Corps' proposed levee system. But this risk is very different than that we showed on the previous map. This is not about the risk of homes flooding, but about neighborhoods facing street flooding, relatively shallow water flooding. It will start as a nuisance, but with more and more sea level rise, this is going to leave these very low-lying areas facing a much larger and different set of issues. Homes can be elevated, but that won't address this type of risk of neighborhood street flooding. Daily flooding will make some streets impassable, creating not just a nuisance, but a threat to public safety. We have already heard anecdotally from the fire department that response times are slower in these areas during flooding events. In some areas, infrastructure solutions are just not easily feasible. This is a zoom in on Hamilton Beach to the north and Broad Channel to the south. And I show this image to point out the intricacies of the shoreline and the amount of the neighborhoods that will be experiencing daily tidal flooding by the mid-century. This is an aerial image of the two neighborhoods, Hamilton Beach on the left and Broad Channel on the right. And when you zoom in here, you can see Hamilton Beach on the right-hand side of this photograph has a rather intricate waterway of Hawtree Basin that goes into the neighborhood, and most of the shoreline is privately owned. Broad Channel has an even more elaborate shoreline where each of these peninsulas, if you will, back onto a series of canals where each home has privately owned waterfront right at the back of their backyards. This makes for a very intricate shoreline and one where infrastructure solutions are really quite limited. And that brings us to the spectrum of land use approaches for the city's coastal areas. In the majority of the city's flood zone, we see the need to retrofit buildings to become more resilient to address those rare storm events like Hurricane Sandy. By adapting the building stock, as well as improving infrastructure and community preparedness, these risks that are faced in these larger geographies can be managed. For these areas, we want to use zoning and land use to accommodate and encourage development to become more resilient, and that's the right-hand side of the spectrum. But in other areas, limiting future development is the necessary first step in those areas facing extreme risk, particularly from daily tidal flooding. In those areas where we foresee daily tidal flooding by mid-century, we recognize that the future in these neighborhoods is drastically different from that of the present. We, as city agencies, have begun to organize our thinking through various options for these neighborhoods. But in all instances, the first step is making certain that we reduce the potential for new development in these areas. This is part of the strategy that Dan Zerilli mentioned in the fall when he was here before the commission that focuses on flexibility and adaptability over time. For now, we need to make certain that we do not make conditions worse while we continue to monitor climate change and develop longer-term plans for these neighborhoods. Which brings us to today's proposal for Broad Channel and Hamilton Beach. I'll now turn it over to Melissa to first discuss Broad Channel. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Melissa Hurlitz. I'm going to talk about how DCP's climate resiliency work has informed the proposal that I'm talking to you about today by giving you an overview of the Old Howard Beach, Hamilton Beach, and Broad Channel Resilient Neighborhood Study. These neighborhoods were chosen because they were especially impacted during Sandy, and they have similar lot typologies, similar conditions, and actually Hamilton Beach is really a sub-neighborhood in a way of Old Howard Beach. So that's why these geographies were grouped together. In December, we released the report for this study, which is also, I think, at the back of your package, which it looks like some of you have. And this is really a summary of our work and informs the actions that I'm talking about today. So over the past 3 years, we've worked with the communities in these neighborhoods to inform this work, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know a lot of the representatives in this community, especially through the Community Advisory Committee, which was appointed by Councilmember Eric Ulrich. It included representatives from Community Boards 10 and 14, because Broad Channel is part of the Board 14 Rockaways Community Board. From the 3 local civic associations of Broad Channel, Hamilton Beach, and Howard Beach, as well as local business owners. In addition to having 5 in-depth Community Advisory Committee meetings that informed our recommendations, I also got to know the local flavor and character of the neighborhoods, if you will. So, for example, people, especially in Broad Channel and Hamilton Beach, actually have high tide charts on their refrigerators so that they can plan for when to move their cars due to incoming high tide, so that they can move their cars to higher ground. This also helps them anticipate whether or not they can get their kids to school that day. I've seen on the Facebook group posts that kids have actually missed school because of high tide, and that's a condition that's happening today. It's not happening daily, but it is happening at least monthly, and this is the kind of thing that we are concerned will be happening regularly in the future. In addition, we presented 4 times to the 2 community boards and presented to the local civic associations, which were really important in crafting the recommendations. Those recommendations include reflecting neighborhood character in Old Howard Beach through a future rezoning. So not something I'm going to talk about today. It's not as time sensitive, but it will be coming before the commission at some point. Also, we want to inform the citywide flood text update that Michael mentioned from some things that we've learned through this study. We want to advance coordinated infrastructure and coastal protection strategies, which Michael mentioned. There aren't a lot of options for Broad Channel and Hamilton Beach to reduce future daily tidal flooding, but we do think there are some investments, especially for Old Howard Beach, that can mitigate the impacts of flooding on the neighborhood. Finally, and what I'm going to talk about today, our recommendation is to enact targeted zoning changes to reflect the unique character and long-term vulnerability of Hamilton Beach and Broad Channel. So the Hamilton Beach PowerPoint is separate, but first I'll give you an overview of the Broad Channel neighborhood, followed by our proposal. Broad Channel is in southern Queens. It's in the middle of Jamaica Bay, surrounded by water on all sides, as you also saw in the aerial image Michael showed. Broad Channel is a true boating culture community where people have lived for generations. It's accessible by one through road, Cross Bay Boulevard, which connects to the mainland Queens to the north and the Rockaway Peninsula to the south. It's also served by the A train and the Rockaway shuttle. These 2 photos here kind of show typical conditions, or what you sort of think of when you think of Broad Channel. Houses over water. There are 54 buildings in Broad Channel over water today. And also in the lower left picture, this is a photo I took during a supermoon high tide after a flood event. So it's more on the extreme end, but these are the kinds of conditions that we're concerned about. A little bit of background for the neighborhood I think is important to understand our proposal as well. In the late 1800s, this neighborhood was developed with small houses built on stilts as a summer getaway. They were houses that were accessible by boat. This predated roads. It was formally settled in 1914 by the Broad Channel Development Corporation, which they really built the land. They filled it in because it was formerly marshland, and built the first roads. It wasn't until the 1930s that Cross Bay Boulevard was constructed, really opening up this community to the rest of New York City. But in 1939, the Development Corporation declared bankruptcy, and the city took over ownership of the land. And it wasn't until fast forward to 1982 that there was an agreement reached for the residents to purchase the land back from the city. In 1988, the first sanitary sewers were constructed, so it took a long time until really infrastructure was developed here, and it is still limited. And in 2012, it was, it's fair to say, devastated by Hurricane Sandy. 97% of the households here reported damages during FEMA inspections, and the average NFIP claims paid in Broad Channel was $76,000. In Broad Channel today, there are 2,500 residents and about 1,000 buildings. The local median household income is a little bit higher than quite a bit higher actually than the Queens average at $68,900. And the percentage of housing units that are owner occupied is also higher at 78%. It's also worth noting that all residents and buildings in Broad Channel are in the 1% annual chance floodplain, including, and I don't have the numbers, but a few in the V zone, which is the wave action zone, that is especially susceptible to those houses that are especially susceptible to damage. The zoning that's in place today is R32. It's been in place since the zoning resolution was adopted in 1961. This zoning allows for all residential building types, but in the top left image, you'll see the most common kind of lot and building in Broad Channel. The typical lot is 25 feet wide by 100 feet deep, and 90% of homes here are single-family detached. So, and only 9% are two-family detached. There are a few homes that are semi-detached, as seen in the middle picture, but these are pretty uncommon. So this R32 zoning that has a 40-foot wide minimum lot width requirement and allows for these other building types is not really appropriate given the context of the area. In addition, the zoning doesn't reflect that there are a number of marinas and sort of boat parking facilities on the southeastern shore of Broad Channel. So that's one thing that we looked at in crafting our proposal. There's also a commercial overlay at the center of Broad Channel. It's a small local retail node that has like a restaurant and a deli and things like that. It's zone C1 too. So this is a breakdown of the map that Michael showed earlier for future sea level rise in this neighborhood. This breaks down the projections for the 2050s into low-end and high-end projections. In the dark purple, this is the low-end projection of 11 inches of sea level rise on top of high tide. We would see that 226 buildings out of about 1,000 would be impacted twice daily at high tide. And on the high end, the 90th percentile projection is for 30 inches of sea level rise on top of high tide, and that would impact 744 buildings out of 1,000. So this is a serious condition that's not really seen elsewhere in the city other than here in Hamilton Beach. Now I'll walk you through the proposal, the actions for Broad Channel, which include a zoning map amendment and a text amendment. So first, perhaps the most unique part of this proposal is a new special coastal risk district, which would be established in the zoning resolution to provide a new zoning tool to signify flood risk in areas of the city vulnerable to projected future tidal flooding. So today we are going to talk about two sub-districts that are proposed in Broad Channel and Hamilton Beach that would have the same general purposes section, but would have different rules for each neighborhood to reflect unique conditions. We're proposing a Broad Channel sub-district over the entirety of the island, really. It would reflect the neighborhood's exceptional flood risk and establish low-density building patterns by modifying the proposed underlying zoning to only allow single-family detached residences to be allowed here. We would also prohibit community facilities with sleeping or overnight accommodations. Even though there's a library and a school, there isn't anything like a nursing home here today, but we wouldn't want vulnerable populations to move into an area where there really aren't infrastructure solutions and where we don't think future density is appropriate. So again, the main restriction as part of this sub-district is limiting future residential development to single-family detached only. This would modify the two proposed underlying zoning districts, one being R3A, which better matches the built conditions here. This zoning district, it's worth noting, has a 25-foot wide lot width, 25-foot lot width minimum, which is the same general lot width that we find here in Broad Channel. And again, this would be modified by the special district. We are also proposing a C3A district on Broad Channel's southeastern shore, where I mentioned that there are a number of marinas currently. And these marinas could not rebuild under existing zoning. Those uses wouldn't be allowed. So we want to allow, if a future storm comes through, we want these marinas to be able to rebuild. We think it's appropriate for the neighborhood character of the area and reflects the type of community that Broad Channel really is. C3A also has a residential equivalent of R3A, so, and the same special district restriction would apply here to only allow single-family detached residences in this portion. Finally, we are proposing to update the existing C12 overlay to a C13 to slightly reduce the off-street parking requirement. The C12 district requires 1 space per 300 square feet of commercial floor area, which existing businesses would have a hard time meeting if they were to redevelop. So the C13 requires 1 space per 400 square feet of floor area. This is just a small tool that we can give to businesses here to, not disincentivize them from making resiliency investments. And next, I will talk about Hamilton Beach.
Perhaps before we go
Which-
on
Yeah.
to the next item.
Any questions for Melissa? Okay, Erwin, and then Fred.
Melissa, is the long-term goal to evacuate this area or to maintain this area?
Would you like to take that?
That's an excellent question. And I think that as of the moment, we are not suggesting that it necessarily have to go to, that the policy has to be retreat. But what we are recognizing is that the future, whatever it may be, is going to be looking very different than that of today's. And so we see this tool, this special district, and the appropriate zoning changes as a way of trying to limit the future density over the course of the next several decades as we figure out what that eventual future may be. But I would say that absent any sort of significant infrastructure investment, which at this point we have no ability to foresee, or we have no way of foreseeing, it certainly seems that all options have to be on the table in terms of the future, the future prospects of these neighborhoods.
Well, you've gone exactly where I was heading. We're creating zoning now that will enable people to build on, I'll use the word on stilts, okay? So that their living room, instead of being at grade, is 4 feet, 5 foot, or whatever above grade.
Yes.
And we will, as a result of a hodgepodge neighborhood of high street floor, low street floor, et cetera, et cetera. When a guy comes out of the house on a storm day, he doesn't know if he's gonna step down 1 foot or 12 feet.
Well, I would say that that is already the case in much of
Right.
the city's coastal
Right.
areas already, where the new FEMA flood maps, so not necessarily the city's doing, but the new FEMA flood maps have increased the elevations, the required elevations of these homes that were either built anew or were reconstructed since Hurricane Sandy. And so that difference in elevation is already present in many areas of the city, and particularly in these areas already.
If we're not paying real attention to infrastructure, because it's an enormous project, what's the incentive for anyone to buy off of somebody who's willing to sell?
Well, so I would actually challenge you about the infrastructure, because we are, in fact, doing quite a bit. So in terms of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has engaged in a study to look at coastal protection for the entirety of Jamaica Bay, and the city has been participating in that work. That is an expensive proposition and a longer-term proposition, as well as the infrastructure for streets and roads and bulkheads. That is also something that the city has undertaken. In fact, there are 3 streets currently under construction in Broad Channel right now to raise those elevations. The trouble is that given the configurations of these neighborhoods, the exact width of the streets, et cetera, those are going to have a limited lifespan given the anticipated sea level rise that we are going to be likely facing. And so certainly by end of century, somewhere between mid and end of century, depending on the rate of sea level rise, even those investments that we are making today in infrastructure may be term limited out, if you will.
Will these affected communities somehow have I won't use the word clear understanding of the future, but a semi-clear understanding of the future when you come in and buy a unit over there, or you upgrade a unit over there? Do they realize, will they be able to realize the exposure that they're incurring?
So That's an excellent question. And so one is that FEMA maps already intend to be a signal to areas that face the extreme risk, that Sandy-like risk. There is no equivalent for daily tidal flooding. However, for the past 3 years, and Melissa really deserves all the credit, has been working with our Community Advisory Committee to get that point across. And through her incredible work, the Community Advisory Committee, which is admittedly a small percentage of the population, now has a very good understanding of the risks that the community faces.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cerullo and then Commissioner Besser.
Thank you. So sort of just branch off from Erwin's question, obviously when it comes to insurance for property owners and tenants perhaps, risk and experience play a very important role. And obviously in this area, there's a lot of experience and sort of known risk, whether or not it has been actually designated. Now, obviously with post-Sandy, lots of things have changed around the city in our shoreline property. But I just wonder what, if any, thought and what analysis, if any, have been done by the department with respect to the designation, an additional designation, does it have any impact at all? Or what might it be? To creating the Special Coastal Risk District. What does that do, if anything more, or doesn't really change anything that exists already, of this sort of what could be perceived for the people who live there and own property there, this scarlet letter of risk?
Another good question. I would say that this is a zoning tool. And so to the extent that a future homeowner or future buyer of a property will understand and will read what the zoning district is, they will see that this has this special designation, which is intended in some ways to convey the fact that this is an area distinct from much of the city's coastal areas otherwise. But that being said, we recognize that relatively few people, when purchasing a property, with the exception of those of us in this room perhaps, would look at the zoning before purchasing a property. So we don't.
But the banks and the insurance companies will, unless someone is paying cash for a property, but you still need insurance.
That's right.
So anyway.
And that brings up a very important distinction, which is that the FEMA flood maps do that for that rare storm event risk. And so when you apply for a federally backed mortgage for the purchase of real estate within the 1% chance flood zone, that property is required to have flood insurance. And FEMA does that not only so that homeowners will actually have insurance, but also as a signal to the market that these areas are at this extreme risk. There is not the equivalent for these areas that have the potential to face daily tidal flooding. There has not been that corollary made into the marketplace as of yet. And so there's the extent that this proposal will do that is likely quite limited, though, recognizing again that this is a zoning.
I mean, I understand that, and it's possible that the question is not narrow enough, because I don't know enough about what might trigger certain types of review, but just conceptually, our action, if our action is what the proposal is, government will be creating a designation on this property, and I just think that we should understand what the implications of that are, even though I know it's about protecting the people who live there.
Yes.
But we should at least be able to embrace what that means in our desire to protect people from this this situation.
We can certainly get, when we come back to you, we'll
Great,
certainly
that
have
would be
more,
great.
provide you with more information. But as we anticipate it right now, the proposal is a zoning action, to be clear. That is, it is not intended to necessarily be something that can substitute for more than zoning.
I understand that, I just
Yeah.
know that sometimes
Sure.
we do things
Fair
that we don't think that they have the, I'm just trying to think through the potential impacts, even if that's not the goal of what the name of this thing is, or what it's called in zoning,
Right.
but somehow it comes back to bite everyone, even though it's all about helping people.
Yep.
Just so, and just, I have one quick question, one
Sure.
follow-up question.
Sure.
So, post-Sandy, do we know if anyone, either privately or through the subsidy programs that existed for rebuilding post-Sandy, rebuilt recently in a manner which would, when this, or if this is adopted, would be non-conforming? And if so, what is the population of those properties?
I mean, almost all the rebuilding that has happened in Broad Channel has been through the Build It Back program, which has essentially replaced the buildings in kind with the same floor area and the same number of units, just at an elevated level.
Okay?
So, of course, those would be grandfathered in under this proposed rezoning. But like I mentioned before, 90% of the lots in Broad Channel are single-family detached. Only 9% are two-family detached. So that's the percentage that would be not conforming.
So that would be the overall percentage of non-conforming?
Right.
Okay.
I can look into the breakdown of those Build
Yeah,
It Back
I
numbers.
just wondered what, I mean,
Yeah.
first, I guess the first population, what is it now versus, what's the legal non-conforming ratio now? And then, did people just invest and did we use taxpayer dollars to rebuild? And then, and now in the next few months, those become, on top of now being in a special designation that, they become legal non-conforming. So, thank you.
Commissioner Besser and then Commissioner Marin.
Thank you, Chair. How many, or what percentage are vacant land?
In Broad Channel.
Let me see.
More than you would think.
Yes. I don't have those numbers. It's actually a fairly low percentage compared to Hamilton Beach, which I'll talk about. Something like a quarter of the lots in Hamilton Beach are vacant.
I'm sorry?
Something like a quarter of the lots in Hamilton Beach are vacant, but it's a very low number on Broad Channel.
Thank you.
I can provide that information
Thank you.
later.
Got it, Rand?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Marin and then Commissioner Efron.
So, like this special lesson goes through guys. First of all, thank you for the presentation. So does this mean then that the action is facilitating ease for the homeowners to be able to lift or rebuild, to comply with the new flood zone, to be able to receive a low insurance rate? Those that have not participated in the Sandy program.
So this will not change this should not change the ability of homeowners to elevate. In fact, we recognize that elevating is still going to be necessary to protect those homes over the near term. Over the next several decades, we do anticipate people living in this neighborhood and continuing to live in this neighborhood. And for those homes, they are still at risk, not only for that longer-term daily tidal flooding, but also the risks of another event like Hurricane Sandy, that rare chance storm. And so being able to elevate those homes in the next several decades is still important, and we do not anticipate being able that this would in any way prohibit that.
No, my question was actually just the opposite.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It actually enables them to lift and be sort of
I would-
non-conforming because if you stay on the floodplain, you're gonna be paying higher insurance rates.
Yes.
So it's to the incentive is to the homeowner.
Absolutely.
To either raise their home or knock it down and rebuild it.
That's
So
right.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, it isn't a question, it's a fact. It's that this action would allow them to then raise their homes to the floodplain levels to be able to lower their insurance rates.
So that's something that is allowed to happen today. What this proposal does a little better is update the underlying R32 zoning to R3A so that the lot width requirements more closely match the existing conditions. So that is one thing that would enable people to rebuild a little
Right,
easier.
it's not conforming, and
Exactly.
if
The-
people get a loan or.
The special coastal risk district alone doesn't do that per se. It's more to reflect the risk and the existing conditions, but.
Thank you.
Commissioner Efron, and then we'll go back to Commissioner
Question
Cantor.
about the public safety aspect of this. If everybody rebuilt to the new floodplain heights, the building back standard,
Yes.
is that enough to manage the very risk you're talking about in building flooding? And
And
if not, is this going far enough?
It's a great question. I think that the way that conceptually that we are looking at this is that there are two distinct risks. If everyone were in the neighborhood were to raise up to the new FEMA standards, that would protect them against that rare storm event, which in any one year, there's a 1% chance of an event like that happening. And actually, these are so low-lying, even a smaller storm are more frequent. And it would be able to protect against that. The trouble is that there's also this longer-term risk of daily tidal flooding, for which elevating your home means that your home is protected, but you may not be able to access that home even twice daily with daily tidal flooding. And so it's a different type of risk, which is why we are suggesting that this is the necessary first step that we take. It is absolutely not the last step that would need to be taken should we go down an eventual other route. And that's to come. I mean, that's in part our intent with this as being the first step.
Thank you. Therefore, it seems as if some coordination with the buildings department about unsafe conditions and whether there's an increase would really inform this conversation. Are there properties now that are, I don't know what the building department would call them, but at risk of
Those more susceptible to
being
damage.
waterlogged or
Yes.
something? Even if they are above the floodplain, because of the twice daily flooding.
But that's a good point. So any home that, I mean, just looking at one of these photos, I don't know for certain, it's almost certain that none of the buildings that we see in this photo have basements, but it's possible that they do. Were they to have basements, that would be a horrible, horrible condition. And so that's some research that we will continue to do.
So I guess from my perspective, I would want to know what the buildings department has to say about the ever-increasing amount of those sort of situations, to make sure that we're not putting in place, and basically, I mean, we're giving them a certain general warning on a cigarette pack, but on the other hand, if we're not giving them the right warning, that's enforced.
Right. I would say, though, that any new building or substantially reconstructed building would be required to comply with FEMA standards. And so it's not all permits that are issued by Department of Buildings, but any of the larger projects would be required to meet that FEMA flood standard, which would eliminate basements and also significantly reduce their flood insurance. But we can certainly get back to you.
It's really the violations I'm concerned about, not, it's imminent danger. It's real, I don't even know what it would be in a low-lying flood area. I'm sure there must be some building issues.
We'll certainly look into the violations.
I also would like to add that we have been working with other city agencies over the course of the past 3 years, like with Department of Transportation, for example, and talking about what are the types of places where we want to make infrastructure investments if those investments will be overtopped by high tide in the 2050s. So that's something that other agencies are aware of and that we want to continue to support and inform.
Commissioner Cantor.
So either I buy a lot and I build, or I'm a guy who's living there and I want to reconstruct. And I raise my house X feet. Is the city going to raise the sewers X feet? Is Con Edison, excuse me, not Con Edison, is the water supply going to raise the underground piping? How do I get my water into the house? How do I get my waste out of the house?
So,
And who's paying?
right.
Am I paying for it? Is it showing up on my taxes?
Well, and so the answer is that there are uncertainties about the longer-term infrastructure investment. As I mentioned earlier, there are select infrastructure investments being made already, including the raising of several roads on Broad Channel. That's, again, in part of of where we are in this process right now is that there's a lot changing in these neighborhoods. Physical conditions are changing with sea level rise. And so we want to be able to use zoning as a tool now to limit the future potential for future density, while being able to ascertain what are the infrastructure investments, what's the cost-benefit analysis that can make sense to do future infrastructure investments, like the raising of additional streets, sewers, et cetera. But that's not something that there's a crystal ball for as of the moment.
Understood, but right now, zoning, generally speaking, when we will rezone an area, we will implicitly acknowledge that there will be or is already infrastructure available
So-
for the 60-story apartment house or the 100-story office.
So the infrastructure that is there, the infrastructure that is there today is sufficient for what the density and the growth that we anticipate foreseeing in the near term. What I am suggesting is the longer term than that, going out well beyond that, beyond our foreseeable horizon, for say the purposes of an environmental.
I'm speaking to the longer term.
Yeah.
And again, if I buy a property right now, I buy it at a distressed price, okay? Because I have to do all these extra activities. Is there any contemplation that the city is gonna, in some way, give either tax relief to these people? By the way, I'm not involved in any of it. Give tax relief to any of these people, or are they gonna?
There's been no discussion of
I'll go
that.
back. Don't you have to speak with Con Edison? Don't you have to speak with the DEP in terms of these things of piping? Because we can all agree that it has to be done, but if the agency doesn't project to it, it's not going to be done. And then there's the issue of, why am I living on the high ground, being forced to pay for those people who are consciously moving into an area that may be, quote, swamp?
Yes. So we certainly have had conversations with the infrastructure providers, DEP, and others. And again, it's for where we are right now, we have to be able to take a first step that does not preclude future actions. And that is what we are proposing and suggesting today.
But that step is a predicate, or is predicated upon the assumption, do we have a, quote, long-term plan or short-term plan? Whether the short-term is 10 years or 30 years.
So we have a plan that is to modify the zoning so that we have the ability to create that longer-term plan as well. I would say we have to have eyes on both at the moment. We have to have eyes on the near term as well as for the longer term. But that longer term is met with a reasonable amount of uncertainty. And that's what makes this so incredibly challenging, is that we don't have the ability to necessarily state today that in any one given year, this is where the risk is going to be, and we cannot, and therefore, without being able to say that, we cannot necessarily state what the infrastructure solutions or the other alternatives would be at that point. And that's really the sort of the leading concept behind this resiliency work, is this idea that as we move forward, we are going to have to adapt over time, and that the actions we take today are intended to not forestall future options.
Well, we're giving people the option of building.
I would say
without
they currently have the option
building
today
or-
to build.
or upgrading their property without them knowing whether that property has 20 years of life or 60 years of life.
That is correct, though I would also add that they have the current option of building today at an even greater density.
Right, which we're trying to curtail
Precisely.
with the zoning. Rayanne,
Thank you. So what if there were, or are there any purchasers or developers that are in the process of purchasing, the property with the development opportunity in the R32 zoning? Is there anything in the middle of?
Is there anything in the pipeline that we know of as of the moment?
No, everything that's being built there is through Build It Back. There's really not a development market in this neighborhood.
So there's no exclusions?
Not at the moment, but that of course could change any moment. I mean, a private developer can come in and purchase any of the vacant lots.
Yeah, we have, when we had our civic association meetings, about 100 people came out, so we feel like we reached a fair amount of residents on the island. But again, like, not a lot of outsiders are coming to Broad Channel to buy land and develop. They might be rejected.
I mean, Melissa, I recall you telling me that there were a significant number of city-owned lots here in
In Hamilton Beach.
Hamilton Beach. Okay.
Hamilton, which I'll talk about next.
Right. Any more questions on Broad Channel? Okay, this is certified. Thank you. Now we'll go on to
Thank you.
Hamilton Beach.
This presentation is going to echo the last one in a lot of ways, but nevertheless, I will. This way you'll remember it. So I'll give a background on Hamilton Beach before going into the rezoning proposal. Hamilton Beach is also a neighborhood in South Queens that's adjacent to JFK International Airport. It's also accessible by only one road, which you'll see a little better in another map, by 102nd Street, which routes through Coleman Square, a small commercial node that serves the A train and Air train station. Much like Broad Channel, Hamilton Beach was originally developed with fishermen's shacks on the creek. And in the late 1800s, a Long Island Railroad station was opened. And I say station because you had to flag down the train in order to get it to stop for you. But this supported the establishment of a year-round community. And in the early 1900s, Hawtree Basin was dredged, and that was used to fill in the land to allow for additional development. But it wasn't until 1995 that the city first expanded its sanitary sewer system to Hamilton Beach, and before that, residents relied on private cesspools. In 2012, the area was also ravaged by Hurricane Sandy. And I don't have the number specifically for Hamilton Beach, but in the combined Old Howard Beach and Hamilton Beach area, 75% of households reported damages during FEMA inspections. And the average NFIP, National Flood Insurance Program, claims paid to Hamilton Beach was $52,000. So this map shows a little better where the one through road, or one road to access Hamilton Beach is 102nd Street. Today in Hamilton Beach, there are 1,400 residents and 400 buildings. The median household income is higher than the Queens average at $71,000, and 75% of housing units are owner occupied. Also, it's worth noting that almost all of the residents and buildings in Hamilton Beach are in the floodplain. The neighborhood is zoned R31, which is a designation that has also been in place since 1961. It allows for 1- and 2-family detached and semi-detached residences. The 1-family detached is the most common lot typology or building type. So, and on the upper left-hand picture, you can see that common building type, this like small cottage bungalow, if you will, on a narrow lot. Actually, even narrower lots here than in Broad Channel. Some are 20, 21, 22 feet wide, which is challenging with the 40-foot minimum lot width requirement under existing zoning. 7% of the houses here are 2-family detached, and 13% are semi-detached, like you see in the lower left-hand picture, so they have this shared party wall. This housing type actually has been more predominant in recent years with the construction of housing on the vacant lots. In Hamilton Beach, about 42% of lots in Hamilton Beach are vacant. And 100 of those lots are city-owned. So while not all of those vacant lots are available to the public for development, they could become available in the future, and we think that the semi-detached that's allowed now under existing zoning is not appropriate for the flood risk and also for the infrastructure that is currently available. This is the sea level rise projections for Hamilton Beach in the 2050s. Again, the low-end projection of 11 inches with high tide is represented with the dark purple. 65 buildings out of about 400 would be impacted twice daily at high tide. And under the high-end projections, the 90th percentile projection of 30 inches on top of high tide, 310 buildings out of about 400 would be impacted twice daily. With that context, I'll walk you through the rezoning proposal. So as part of the special coastal risk district that would be established as part of the broad channel application, we are proposing also a Hamilton Beach sub-district that would modify proposed underlying zoning. The sub-district would signify the risk here and limit future development to two-family detached residences only on lots 40 feet wide or greater. Single-family detached buildings would be allowed throughout the area. The reason for this change or distinction from broad channel is that there are actually a wider variety of lot sizes found in Hamilton Beach. So we do want to allow for lots that we think are wide enough and substantial enough to still be built with two-family detached residences. And we still think this meets the goal of reducing overall density in the area. And in general, it's the semi-detached buildings that are introducing the most amount of density to the neighborhood. We would also limit or not allow community facilities with sleeping or overnight accommodations in Hamilton Beach. Today, there's only a volunteer fire department that would count as a community facility, but again, we don't want to allow things like nursing homes that would introduce vulnerable populations to the area. We also propose changing the existing R31 zoning to R3A. This district permits 1 and 2 family detached residences, and like I mentioned, the coastal risk sub-district for Hamilton Beach would only allow those 2 family detached on the wider lots over 40 feet wide. This district also better matches the lot width conditions of the area, and it would bring more lots into conformance with the 25-foot wide lot width requirement. We are also proposing to update the C12 commercial overlay in Coleman Square to a C13 to better match existing commercial uses and development patterns. Again, the C12 overlay requires 1 parking spot per 300 square feet of commercial floor area, and the C13 would be 1 per 400 square feet. So we think this is more appropriate given the built context here and the types of commercial buildings you see on small lots in Coleman Square. And with that, that concludes my presentation for Hamilton Beach.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. Questions? Commissioner Cantor.
Cheryl mentioned earlier coordination between the agency and building department. And that would certainly be necessary, however, several feet higher, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So being with the building department makes it obviously necessary. And I would wonder about the wisdom of actually enacting this to full understanding of the implications of the building department level. The other comment that I had, you mentioned that there were a large number of vacant lots owned by the city.
Mm-hmm.
The city of New York took a whole lot of fill, rock excavation in various suburbs, and they used it elsewhere in the city. World Trade Center, they dug out enough rock and fill to be able to build Battery Park City. I'm wondering why you guys are still contemplating which way to go long range. With clean fill piles, if you will, could be put on any of those vacant sites to wait for next year.
Well, the vacant sites, which you can see in this image denoted in the dark gray, are very much scattered throughout the area. So the ideal way to protect this neighborhood is to protect the shoreline. But since that is all, privately owned, that's not possible. You know, we have been talking with other city agencies. DCAS is the primary owner of these city-owned lots. Some are also owned by DEP. As part of one of our recommendations in the report, we call out the need to study the transfer of these city-owned properties for uses like green infrastructure or something that would, you know, that would soak up the floodwaters.
I would say that given the scattered nature of the lots, that filling the individual lots would actually do very little good for the long-term health of the neighborhood as a whole. You'd have to be able to fill the entirety of the neighborhood. That would require getting all of the homes in the entirety of the neighborhood to participate all at once, which again is something that we've looked through the possibilities of, but again, seemingly infeasible.
I'm talking about taking landfill coming from Brooklyn, if you will, and storing it, not anticipating it to be the new street level. Just storing it, you guys make up your mind
Oh, I see what you're saying.
which way to go.
I mean, I think this area is challenged by that because there's only one road. There's a bridge here, and then the main road for the neighborhood goes down 104th Street. It's really not usable for large trucks or anything like that.
Right.
far
I
as I
would say
know.
the city also has the Mayor's Office of Environmental Remediation that oversees the clean fill program. And they currently have a program in place for the use of clean fill for projects like subway excavations and the like.
Commissioner Besser?
Sorry, I haven't been here in a while, so I have to make up.
No, you can have at it.
For the commercial overlay, is it 150 feet? And do you plan on, are you comfortable with it like that, or are you planning to change it to 100?
So it's hard. This isn't zoomed in, but
I know, I can't.
in
see.
general, the C13 replaces the existing overlay and then expands it a little. So on this little section, it goes mid-block, and then I think something like 370 feet from the south to the north end of this lot. This section covers the entire block, and then on this section, it's 150 feet deep. So we've captured all of the commercial uses that are, you know, conglomerated together in Coleman Square.
Any other questions? Commissioner Levin?
Simple question on the previous page, page 12. The house image, is that a post-Sandy, up on stilts example of how the new standards work?
Yes, it is. And that's a common, I show it because it's a common lot width too. It's a pretty narrow building.
Other questions? Was this your first time, Melissa, before the
Yes.
commission? That's pretty impressive
Thank
debut.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other questions. This is certified. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's now go to item number 3, page 32, proposed renewal of a previously approved special permit to facilitate enlargement to an existing accessory parking garage. We're on item number 32, back from Community Board referral, the AECom renewal. And Manny Lavares is our presenter.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. The Albert Einstein College of Medicine is renewing a special permit that was approved in 2012. It's a 3-year renewal. Their campus is located in the Morris Park section of Bronx Community District 11. They are bounded on the north by Jacoby Hospital, on the east by Eastchester Road. Sackett Avenue forms the southern boundary, and Tenbrook, Newport, and this line here, which is just off of Stillwell, going back into the campus right off of Jacoby. The surrounding area on the west is two-family detached and attached homes. You also have some commercial uses here. On the east, you have an M11 zoning district with light industrial uses, some commercial. And you can see the Amtrak North Corridor here, and you also have Calvary Hospital, one of the uses further east, and the Hutchinson Metro Center, which is medical and office space. Now, here you have two different boundaries. This is 2012 approval on the left here, and the 2012 approval itself. One of the actions before the commission was an authorization to enlarge and modify their large scale. So what they've done, as you can see, the boundary leaves out this building here in the upper left-hand quadrant, and they actually included it here. The second action that was before the commission in 2012 for the approval was to be allowed to relocate parking, accessory parking, without regard to lot lines. And the third action was the special permit for one of the garages within their large scale. Now, the large scale, you have their facilities here, you have the hospital, research centers, educational, et cetera, as well as this research center here. And you also have three, well, it's called the, it's their campus, and it has three 28-story buildings, as well as a recreation center here. The parking, which is outlined here, consists of two garages, one located on top of the other. These were constructed in 1973 pursuant to 3 BSA variances. Now, you're looking west across East Chester Road, and you have the garages here. It's a portion of the lower garage, and behind it is the upper garage, and you can see two of the three residential towers. Again, this is just further to the right, looking west, East Chester Road. You have a traffic light at this location, and traffic goes in if you're going to the upper garage currently, or if you're going to the lower garage, you go here. Now, the distinction between the upper and lower garages is that the lower garages, first of all, is mostly below ground, and is for the students and staff of ACOM. The upper garage, seen back here, is for visitors and employees of ACOM. Now, this was part of the plan that was approved in 2012 by the City Planning Commission. And let me just give you the orientation here. You have East Chester Road. You have this curb cut where you actually saw the two cars here. So gaining access to the upper garage, you walk through here, and you have your ticket spitter here. Now, there were two stations here. They were moved inside. Now they're here. And the reason for that is to allow reservoir space for the parking, which they had done before. And once you get your ticket, you can either go right or left, or you can go to this external ramp, which is located to the south of the facility, which will take you up to the other levels. Now, I want to mention that the existing garage is currently a one-level garage. It contains 115 accessory parking spaces, and they were approved for expanding to 3 upper levels, and that will be a total of 336 spaces. Now, this shows this diagram here shows you the layout of both garages. One sits on top of the other. This hatched one is the lower garage, contains 575 spaces. The current garage here contains 150, and that will change since it was modified. The previous plan that I just showed you, the modification was adding 21 reservoir spaces as well as 20 spaces for the handicap, and these spaces are wider spaces, so you're going to lose the amount of parking that you have, which is 115, and that'll be 89 parking spaces. The upper drawing here is East Chester Road, actually shows you, and you saw it when you looked at the drawing that actually had the stations and the 2 cars. It's a ramp here, takes you inside for the upper, and the other ramp here, and this is what it will look like following construction. Now, the construction of the garage itself, the question how is parking going to be treated if you're doing construction in this facility? We've asked the applicant, and the applicant stated that right now, they don't have a concrete plan, but in the event, well, when they do construct the facility, that they will actually have alternate parking, either adjacent to or within the campus. Also, the Community Board 11, sent us a letter waiving their right to have a recommendation. Are there any questions?
Manny, do you want to advise the commission as to why they did not proceed under the expiring special permit?
The applicant?
Yes.
Well, thank you. They are having funding issues. Also, Montefiore has taken over ACOM, so you have the issue of reorganization and priorities. That's basically why they haven't constructed. I've spoken with the applicant, and their intention is to construct, according to the zoning resolution and authorization, special permits, they can be renewed if you file within 4 years of the approval of the submission of the applicant. Within 4 years of the approval of the application, then you have an additional 3-year terms.
Okay,
thank you. Questions? Commissioner Marine?
Manny, thank you. Why is it that, can we go back to the large-scale plan, where you showed how the large-scale plan now encompasses, why was it that the previous action allowed for that garage, its size, and its capacity?
Exactly.
Why are we moving the large-scale plan now over to the other side? And is that Jacoby, or is that still Albert Einstein, Montefiore at this point?
Okay, it's Albert Einstein. This is Albert Einstein here,
Okay,
right? This is before the approval, and it was how this was approved by the Planning Commission, the large scale, back in 1993.
and I realize that. My question was, so in other words, the one on the right is exactly the way they applied 4 years ago?
Exactly, yes.
We're asking?
Yes.
Got it, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Any other questions? Okay. Commissioners, we would need your assent by show of hands to send an approval letter to the Department of Buildings indicating our okay with the extension. Thank you.
Thanks, Manny. Let's now go to item number 4, page 63. With respect to the 34th Street heliport, it's a proposed special permit to facilitate its continued use. On item number 4, page 63, and our presenter is Jamie Capito, lead project planner from the Manhattan office.
Hi, good afternoon. This project is for the East 34th Street heliport. It is a joint application by the New York City Department of Small Business Services and New York City Economic Development Corporation. They are seeking approval of a special permit pursuant to zoning resolution section 7466, heliports, to allow for a heliport for a term of 10 years, subject to the terms and conditions of the previously approved special permit. The City Planning Commission previously approved 3 limited term special permits regarding the subject property in 1971, 1996, and in 2001. In 1971, the CPC approved a permit for a term of 5 years for the use of a heliport to operate from 1976 to for a term of 5 years, and it operated until 1976. However, from 1976 to 1996, it operated without an approved special use permit. In 1996, CPC then approved an application by the Department of Small Business Services and EDC for a permit for 10 years. Conditions that were included in this permit included hours of operation from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., with tourist operations limited on Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Conditions also required a 47% reduction in operations and route restrictions. Subsequently, in 1996, City Council modified this special permit approval with conditions that set the permit to expire in 2001 that prohibited Saturday and Sunday operations. They also modified conditions that required sightseeing helicopters to be easily identified with clearly marked numbers and prohibited Sikorsky 14-seat helicopters or helicopters of similar or larger sizes from using the facility. The conditions also required EDC to establish a heliport monitoring task force to include local officials and interested members of the community to determine compliance with the terms and conditions. There were then 2 legal challenges to these terms and conditions of the 1996 special permit imposed on City Council. On 1997, the U.S. District Court ruled that the City Council had overreached its authority with the terms of the special permit, which included but not limited to the term that stipulated routes that helicopters must follow from when taking off and approaching the heliport. In 1998, the City of New York appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the second unit, which in part granted and in part denied this permanent injunctive relief for the city. In summary, the East 34th Street heliport had been restricted to no weekend operations, no tour sightseeing operations, a maximum limit of 28,800 flight operations annually, which was a 47% reduction from the 1996 operating levels, and all terms and conditions set forth by the City Council Resolution number 1558. In 2001, the CPC approved an application for a term of 10 years with conditions. Certain terms and conditions were to be set in the management contract that also limited the weekday operations from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and prohibited weekend operations as well as sightseeing operations. It also limited the maximum number of flights to 28,800 annually. In 2002, the City Council modified this approval for a term of 10 years, and they set a provision within this approval. They wanted to establish a 5-year performance review before having the heliport operate for another 5 years. Such performance review included, without limitation, a review of the operator's noise, cleanliness and response to complaints, and compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. This review was to be submitted to the local community board, council member, borough president, and the city planning commission prior to election to continue the operation of the heliport to allow for another 5 years of operating. The applicant has stated that the 2007 review was performed as required, however, final documentation was unable to be located. EDC has, however, provided a signed compliance review as part of this application, indicating that the heliport was in compliance of the terms of its heliport with regard to the number of flights and restriction of tourist flights. EDC has also noted that in 2015, the heliport had gone from one of the busiest heliports in the area to the least busiest, with a 75% reduction in flights. As part of this application, the applicant proposes to exclude this City Council provision requiring a 5-year performance review of the heliport operator, and will incorporate the permit conditions in all future operating agreements. The surrounding land uses are characterized by a mix of public facilities, institutions, high-density mixed-use residential and commercial uses. West of the heliport is separated by an elevated FDR drive, which you can see here. The NYU Langone Medical Center is to the southwest, and as well as the Bellevue Hospital campus. West of the NYU Langone and north of the heliport is predominantly residential. That includes the Kip Bay Towers, Rivergate, 626 First Avenue, and Manhattan Place. To the south of the heliport is also a residential area that includes Waterside Plaza. The 34th Street Midtown Ferry Terminal is 2 blocks to the heliport. Also is a public parking lot with 200 spaces. The heliport is flanked to the east by the East River Esplanade. The project site is served by the M34 and M34A bus lines. The project site, access to the site is primarily provided by East 34th Street and FDR Service Road, and the East 34th Street heliport is a city-owned facility. The total lot area exclusive of underwater leasehold property contains approximately 40,000 square feet, of which 26,442 square feet is used for heliport operations. Here are pictures of the existing conditions of the heliport. As you can see, the picture on the left, the top two pictures are of the actual heliport pads. This is the office location of the heliport. Here is another photo of the existing conditions of the esplanade looking north towards the heliport, and the heliport is here. And here is a site plan of the heliport. The site comprises of 5 parking spaces, which are located right adjacent to the FDR Drive. There are 2 construction-type trailers that serve north and south passenger trailers, which is located here and here. An underground fuel tank and 5 helicopter landing pads. The helicopter landing pads are located here. There are 5 helicopter landing pads, however, 1 is used for emergency landings only. There are no proposed plans to physically modify the heliport. However, the applicant has stated that the New York State Department of Transportation will not allow construction to occur because no buildings are allowed beneath the FDR highway. Therefore, the applicant is proposing to exclude the condition from the previous special permit approval relating to the construction of a permanent waiting area. The heliport is to be operated Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and will continue to serve the business community, police operations, medical evacuations, and the print and electronic media. EDC's contract will expire with McQuarrie Aviation North America in August 2017, with a 6-month extension through February 2018. Prior to the conclusion of the extension period, EDC plans to issue an RFP for an operator to manage the heliport until the end of the term approved by the special permit. The East 34th Street heliport is one of 3 heliports in New York City. The other heliports are downtown heliport at Pier 6 on the East River, just north of Battery Maritime Building and corporate users, and the West 30th Street heliport primary for sightseeing tours, corporate and government users. The New York City Department of Small Business Services and EDC request approval of special permit to the zoning resolution to allow for heliport of 10 years. In order to allow for this use of a heliport, a special permit is needed and that are subject to the following findings: that the heliport is an appropriate use of land and that will not unduly interfere with the surrounding land uses, that due consideration has been given to the selection of the site situated near or adjacent to large parks or open areas or bodies of water. This application will also be referred to the Federal Aeronautics Administration. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you, Jamie. Questions? Commissioner Cantor.
Jamie, the sightseeing is limited to weekends, did you say?
There will be no sightseeing tours.
There will be no sightseeing?
No.
Other questions? Commissioner Cerullo.
It's not so much related to this, but it triggers a question. The monitoring of compliance, is that a self-policing and then filing mechanism? You could lose count after 1,655 flights if somebody's sitting there. But what is the process of ensuring compliance?
Yes, it's a good question. I can follow up with
Okay.
EDC on that. I have to get back to you on
Just more informationally than anything else. Thank you.
that. Okay.
Commissioner Levin.
Well, I had 2 questions, and that was actually one of them. I think it's more than informationally. They're proposing to eliminate from the terms of the special permit the performance review that the city council imposed on them the last time around. And so I would, I think we have to grapple with what that was and understand. I guess they just kind of didn't do it, so now they just want permission they want to legalize their having not done it and to continue not doing it. And I think we have to ask, whether that's correct public policy.
It'll be an interesting EULA.
We will find out in the course of the review. But I also wanted to ask about the relationship between the heliport and the planning that has gone on in recent years for the Esplanade and the East River waterfront. Is there, how do those two relate? Is there, in thinking about the East River waterfront and the continuation of the Esplanade, are there things about the layout of the heliport that ought to change?
As far
Does
as
it need
I,
a fresh look, given all the work that we've been doing, you've been doing?
I can get back to you on that, but as
Okay.
far as I know, there will be no changes to the heliport as part of this permit
Okay,
application.
well, I guess what
But I can-
I'm wondering
I
is,
see where you're getting at.
has the city thought about whether there should be some changes to improve the waterfront while still allowing the heliport to function?
Yes, okay, I'll get back to you on that.
Thanks.
Commissioner Efron.
Just want to say, since our former chairman isn't here, I am curious about the regional impact of this and the opportunity, and I hope, in the course of the hearing, we will hear from either business leaders or business associations to hear about the value of having the side access, particularly in connection with Rendon and the biotech investment the city's made just south of here.
Okay.
Other questions? Thank you, this is certified.
Thank you.
Let's now move to item number 5, page 102. Proposed Department of Sanitation garage for Community District 11, which involves a proposed change to the East Harlem Urban Renewal Plan, site selection, and acquisition actions. Our presenter is Edwin Marshall, who's the lead project planner from the Manhattan office. Item number 5, page 102.
Good afternoon, Vice Chairman Knuckles. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This will be the first of 2 projects that I'll be presenting to you this afternoon. Both projects are located in East Harlem, and both projects are located within 2 or 3 blocks of each other. So when you look at the second project that I'll present to you today, you'll recognize that the community, the neighborhood is essentially the same. The Department of Sanitation is seeking discretionary approvals to relocate their District 11 sanitation garage from its current location on East 99th Street, as well as their lot cleaning headquarters, which is located on 123rd Street, from its current location to a new site located on 127th Street. Again, the project site is located in East Harlem, Manhattan Community District 11. How do we do this? Okay. There are requested actions that sanitation is seeking. One is a site selection and acquisition of the site, of which sanitation and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services is the applicant, and also an amendment to the East Harlem Urban Renewal Plan to change the land use designation from a material recycling facility to a light industrial use. Now, the project site, as shown on the image here, is located on a block that's bounded by 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, 127th Street, and 128th Street. The project site is outlined in the red. It comprises a little more than 48,000 square feet, of which 24,000 square feet is a paved parking area. The project objectives are fairly straightforward. The Department of Sanitation wants to consolidate its existing facilities from 3 locations to 1 location within Community District 11 to serve Community District 11. As I said in my opening remarks, they want to relocate their district garage that's located on 99th Street, as well as their lot cleaning headquarters, which is located on 123rd Street. This is an image that shows the existing facilities that serve Manhattan Community District 11 by the Department of Sanitation. The star, which is located right here, is the East 99th Street garage. The lot cleaning unit up here at 123rd Street, and also there's a 3rd facility located at 131st Street. That is the Manhattan 10 garage. That serves, the collection needs for Community District 10, which abuts Community District 11 right here. This is the boundary between Community District 11 and Community District 10. Some of the collection trucks that serve District 11 are located at this facility as well. This image shows the existing garage at 199th Street. You can see the garage located right here. The footprint comprises about 18,000 square feet of lot area. And then there's a lot that's located right here, which has about 16,000 square feet of lot area. You can see the sanitation vehicles that are parked here. It's right across the street from Metropolitan Hospital. This is the Metropolitan Hospital campus located right here. This is This is 99th Street, this is 96th Street. And you can also see residential development located just north, and as well as on the western portion of the block. There are certain deficiencies with the current location at 99th Street, which is facilitating and precipitating sanitation to move from this location. One, as I said before, and I mentioned the lots, there are vacant lots that are located on 2nd Avenue. 2 of them are managed by sanitation. They're outlined in the yellow. And the red lot is privately owned, that's leased by sanitation. And the garage is leased by sanitation from the Health and Hospitals Corporation. There are issues. The Manhattan 11 garage is undersized and is in very poor physical condition, especially on the 2nd floor. They cannot park any of their vehicles on the 2nd floor. And also, you can see that there's some equipment that's stored on the street. You can see snow plows that are stored on the street here, and there's a Jersey barrier that basically provides a barrier between the snow plows and anything that would be parked on the street to the east of that. And also, as I mentioned in my previous remarks, there's been some new residential development, and also this garage is located directly across the street from Metropolitan Hospital. This next image shows the lot cleaning unit on 123rd Street. This is 123rd Street, this is 3rd Avenue, this is Lexington Avenue. This facility comprises a 3-story commercial building and a vacant lot assemblage, which totals about 19,000 square feet. This land assemblage is owned by the city, and the building is leased from a private entity. This image shows what the building looks like. Again, this is the lot cleaning headquarters on East 123rd Street. So, the project site description, this is the project site on 127th Street. The site that sanitation is seeking to acquire is on block 1792, lot 5, and a part of lot 28. Again, it has 48,000 square feet. And also, there's a 3-story office building that's located on the site as well. The area outlined in the yellow shows the site to be acquired and used by sanitation. This is the 3-story office building that has about 91,000 square feet. That building would be repurposed, and offices would be placed in there to serve as administrative offices for the lot cleaning unit, as well as to serve the Manhattan 11 garage. You can see the rest of the block is developed by a Potamkin auto dealership, which anchors the eastern portion of the block. There's a church that anchors the western portion of the block. Directly across the street, you have a city park. Cracker's Whack Park is located right here. And also, you have directly across the street, you have a site that's going to be developed as part of the New York Proton Center, which is a new nuclear medicine facility that's under construction right now. Walking the commission through the rest of the block, this is an image that shows 127th Street. You can see the project site, you can see the Potamkin building that abuts it, and this is looking south from 128th Street, and again, you can see how that lot is developed. The project site is also located within the Harlem East Harlem urban renewal area. Between 1991 and 1994, it was used as a material recycling facility. That facility was shut down in 1994 as part of the waste management plan initiative that the city has and had implemented at that time. This site is designated as Site 16A within the Harlem East Harlem Urban Renewal Plan. A map showing existing land uses in the area. Again, we know what's happening on the block. The commission saw that in a previous image. The Proton Center development site located here. You have a mix of residential and commercial uses south of 125th Street, and mostly auto uses and some institutional uses, as well as open space uses located north and west of the site. So the proposed project would feature, again, repurposing this building right here and building an extension, as well as using a portion of the parking lot to park sanitation vehicles. There are vehicles, you can see in the image right now, these are accessorized vans. These vans would be relocated to this lot right here. This is the project site and plan. This is the existing 3-story building, again, 91,000 square feet. An addition of about 8,700 square feet would be built to it. This is basically to serve as a truck washing station as well as provide space for maintenance and repair. And the rest of the lot would be open storage, and again, trucks would be parked on that paved portion of the parking lot. This is the operations breakdown. There would be 41 vehicles stored there in total. Most of them would be collection trucks serving Manhattan Community District 11. Again, they're being relocated from the garage on 99th Street. However, you may recall that I showed an image of the lot cleaning unit, that very large vacant land assemblage that had about 19,000 square feet. Sanitation will hold on to that, and it will park their lot cleaning equipment in that space. This will be a 24-hour facility. The commission can see the different shifts, midnight 8, 6 to 2, and 4 to 12, and the peak time is on Wednesday between 6 and 6:30 a.m. This image shows the collection routes. The trucks will leave the facility and go south on 2nd Avenue and return north on 3rd Avenue. The area in blue is basically Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And the area in pink is Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in terms of the collection schedule. And these are the requested actions. Site selection by lease, the Department of Sanitation and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services are the applicants. It would acquire, there's a lot that we talked about in our presentation, again, 48,000 square feet or so. And also there's a 91,000 square foot building on that parcel. There would be an amendment to the Harlem East Harlem Urban Renewal Plan that would change the site designation from material cycling facility to light industrial. That use, that designation is more compatible and more consistent with the proposed use for this site. And also, there would be some cleanup action in terms of amending the urban renewal plan to make sure that the site boundaries reflect what is currently there now. With that, concludes my presentation. I'll take your questions or comments.
Thank you, Edwin. Questions? Commissioner Efron?
Thanks for the presentation. 128th Street, the Crackers-Wack part that's just to the north of the facility. Is there any way the Parks Department can tell us its peak hours to make sure that the trucks idling and queuing to get into the overhead gate on 128th Street doesn't match up with when most children are there, which does seem like something to really consider.
Okay.
And I don't know what the access is from that part, whether it's gated on that side, or it would just be helpful to know if kids are crossing the street
Okay.
there, or if there's another pedestrian exit elsewhere in the park.
Other questions? Commissioner Levin?
Yeah, Edwin, I have a hard time visualizing the capacity of this new space matched up with the information that's provided about the number of vehicles that would call this garage home. Are all of those 41 vehicles going to be able to park there if it's ever required? Or are they out floating around enough so that we don't have to have parking spaces for all of them?
All the vehicles, the sanitation vehicles, will be accommodated on site. These are vehicles of various dimensions. I mean, there are 18 collection trucks,
Right.
but there's also smaller trucks like SUVs, smaller cars that sanitation business. Maybe we can go back to
Yeah,
Yeah,
go back to the
there's a page in the EIS that shows nothing like 18 collection trucks, little on the drawing. So I just want to be sure that this is right-sized. I mean, I understand this is, the city works hard to find these sites, and this one probably has some challenges to it.
Edwin, you want to go back to the visual that we have from 128?
Okay, aerial?
No, the elevation. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't show an elevation. I just have the.
No, the picture of the, didn't you show that? You showed a picture of the site.
Usually the truck on the right, Jersey barriers on the left.
Oh, you're talking about on 100 and on 99th Street.
Yeah. No,
No?
no, I'm talking about 128th Street.
Oh, let's see. Well, this is what this shows.
You mean the bird's
outline.
eye view? Yeah. Oh, that's
Bird's
bird's
eye
eye,
view.
yeah.
Isn't there a ground level shot that you had with that? Well,
Well-
that's a little bit, yeah.
Give us the plan with the truck.
I just have this.
Yeah. Because all the labels on that,
No, you,
kind
slide 8 is where you have the truck and the Jersey barrier.
no, that's 99th Street.
That's on the 99th Street garage. This is an image that shows what is proposed for the site. This is the existing building,
Okay.
and this is the proposed building that would provide space for the maintenance and for truck washing. And this is where the trucks would be parked outside.
Okay, so no trucks parked, unlike, sanitation has a great record of building really fabulous new sanitation facilities around the city. I've seen one in Brooklyn, and there's one at the end of West 57th Street, and there's one at Spring Street. They really do just a terrific job. This one looks like it's not going to present the same wonderful design
No.
possibility that they've been able to achieve at other locations.
Okay.
So maybe all I'm asking is that when it comes back through public review, I'm sure we'll hear about this from the community board and the borough president. Really like to understand how this site is going to work for that intensity of use. Particularly as we plan in your next presentation for a lot more residential use nearby, and knowing that there are 2 churches and a school to the west, and it's a, it's a challenging location.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Efron.
Just want to add to that very astute comment, that it's visible from the FDR, and it is many people's first or second view of Manhattan. And with Crackers Whack, which I think might even be landmarked,
It is.
it does seem important aesthetically. It has something there that's at least not aggressively.
Got it.
Also,
Let me go to Irwin, then I'll come back to you, Orlando.
Thank you. The the rendering, or the pictures that you're looking for is on page 8. That's number 1. Existing conditions of Manhattan 11 Garage. Now, my question would be,
Oh, yeah, no, that's,
what are they going to do with the abandoned parcels?
Okay. The Manhattan 11 garage, they leased that from Health and Hospitals Corporation. We don't know what Health and Hospital intends to do with that parcel. We do know that it'll be remanded back to them. We will continue to ask HHC to see what they intend to do with that. The other properties, the lot cleaning unit building, that's a privately owned building. We reached out, we tried to find out from the owner what they intend to do with that. They were not, forthcoming with that information.
Is it the intent that the current zoning remain in place?
Yeah, I mean, the lot cleaning unit building is located on a block that's zoned R7A, which is a contextual low, medium-density district. And the same thing is true with Metropolitan Hospital. The garage that's located opposite Metropolitan Hospital, that's also zoned R7A. There aren't any intentions to rezone those parcels at this time.
So, at the moment, what can be built?
Well, at the moment, right now, on the garage that's located on 99th Street, you can build a community facility there. You can build residential up to 4 FAR within a contextual building envelope, or you can have a mixed-use residential community facility building. The same thing is true with the site on 123rd Street, R7A, either residential or mixed residential community facility or standalone community facility building.
Are these sites susceptible or suitable is a better word for MIH?
They would probably need to be upzoned in order to take advantage of what MIH provides. The FARs are very, very low, so definitely an increase in density would be warranted to really take advantage of an MIH.
they're M1 sites now, right?
Excuse me?
They're M1s now, right?
Well, both sites, the one that's opposite Metropolitan Hospital and the lot cleaning site are zoned R7A.
Oh,
The
okay.
current site is zoned M31,
All right.
the one that they're seeking to acquire.
Okay. Commissioner Marin, did you have a
question
question?
asked and answered. Thank you.
Any other questions for Edwin on this application? All right, this is certified.
So Edwin will now also present the next item. We're at item number 6, page 189, proposed zoning map and zoning text amendments, city map amendment, and disposition of city-owned property to facilitate a mixed-use development and commemorate the Harlem African Burial Ground in Community District 11, Manhattan. We're on item number 6, page 189.
Okay, so this is the second project that I'll be presenting to you, located in East Harlem. The Economic Development Corporation is seeking several discretionary approvals to facilitate the 126th Street African Burial Ground Memorial and Mixed-Use Project. The project would repurpose the former East 126th Street Bus Depot site, which is located in the northeast portion of Manhattan Community District 11. This is the Bus Depot site. It occupies a full block that's bounded by First Avenue, Second Avenue, 126th Street, and 127th Street. The proposed actions are a zoning map amendment from M12 to C63. The C63 rezoning would basically extend an existing C63 district which is located opposite the site to the west, on the west side of Second Avenue. A zoning text amendment which would designate the project site as an MIH designated area to facilitate affordable housing through MIH. A city map amendment that would narrow a portion of Second Avenue and convey a small portion of the demapped area and append that to the project site. And also a disposition of city-owned property, which is the disposition of the bus garage as well as the demapped portion of Second Avenue. Now, the project location, again, is located in the northeast portion of East Harlem, which is located right here. The bus garage is approximately 105,000 square feet. The footprint comprises that. The bus parking area, which is just outside of it along Second Avenue, is about 9,700 square feet. The total area is a little more than 115,000 square feet. If the commission will notice, there is this area, this sort of like trapezoidal area here. This is the African burial ground, the remnant of a former cemetery, which I'll talk about later in my presentation. And this shows the burial ground, and this is basically the footprint of the bus garage and the adjacent parking area. And you can see that the burial ground extends into the footprint of the garage, and a small portion of that extends under the bed of 126th Street. These are images that show the existing built condition. You can see the garage located right up here. This is the Triborough Bridge. The Bronx is over here. This is Second Avenue. This is Third Avenue. This is what the garage looks like right now. It's an existing two-story building. This is another image that shows it looking south from 127th Street. The garage was in operation from the 1940s till about 2015 when the MTA vacated the garage. The buses were relocated to a new facility located on Lenox Avenue, also known as Malcolm X Boulevard, between 146th and 147th Streets. This image shows the larger neighborhood. Again, this is the bus depot, and just to orient the commission, this is 125th Street right here. This is the Triborough Bridge. And the area north of 125th Street, as we saw in the previous presentation, mostly auto-related uses, a lot of vacant lots. This is the Disney site, the Department of Sanitation site that we just spoke about right here. South of 125th Street, you have residential uses. You have Taino Towers, which is located right here. The Robert Wagner houses, which are a public housing development, also south of 125th Street. But most notably, we've also had some new construction. This building right here at the northwest corner of 124th and 2nd Avenue is the Tapestry. And this building was built as part of the 125th Street rezoning. The commission approved this with the rezoning in 2008. There are 185 residential units in this building, of which 37 are permanent affordable through the inclusionary housing program. This is the first building to use inclusionary housing, the inclusionary housing bonus in Harlem. The existing zoning is M12. As the commission is aware, M12 districts allow light manufacturing uses. Residential uses are not permitted as of right, and certain community facility uses are allowed as well. I want to talk a little bit about the project background. There's going to be a lot of conversation about the community process. There was a lot of community engagement with this. The community engagement essentially was the bedrock, the foundation that drove this project. What you see in the image before you right now are basically the partners. This is a partnership between the speaker, between the borough president, between the Community Board 11, as well as the Harlem African Ground Task Force, which was created in 2009. And their purpose was basically to come up with a framework as to how the burial ground should be memorialized and how it should be treated in any type of development proposal. And lastly is the Bus Depot Task Force, which is like a small interagency working group that basically got gathered and talked about how the site should be redeveloped, including an accommodation for the memorial and for the burial ground. So basically this group, they sort of provided a compass that sort of directed the conversation both up to this point since 2009 through public review and after the public review process, no doubt. So this is the site history. This site goes back to the city's colonial times, goes back to the 1600s. There was a church known as the Low Dutch Reformed Church. It was formed in 1660. It is Harlem's oldest church and one of the city's oldest churches. The burial ground was there to basically serve the church, and the burial ground was used to bury not only enslaved Africans, but also formerly enslaved Africans and free Africans as well. Through the 1800s, there was a significant amount of urbanization in this area. The shoreline was built out. And as a result of that, there have been a number of uses. One use that predominated on the site for the longest time is a movie studio. There have been a couple of movie studios that were built there. And basically, you can see an image right here that shows one of the movie studios that was built on the site. That basically remained in place to the 1940s. And then that building was torn down and replaced by a trolley barn. The trolley barn was superseded or replaced or repurposed by a bus garage. The company Mapstored in Manhattan and Bronx Surface Transit Operating Authority operated that garage, and then they were taken over by the MTA in the 1960s. In the 2000s, there's been intensive documentary study regarding the possibility of a colonial burial ground and African burial ground on the site, and as a result of that, the Harlem African Ground Task Force was formed in 2009. And as I said previously, the MTA vacated the garage in 2015, and that basically put this site in play for redevelopment. Now, the African Burial Ground Task Force was founded in 2009. Was formed in 2009, and its purpose basically, as I said, was to memorialize the history and the fact that a burial ground existed on this site. The image that you see before you, you see a speaker, Melissa Mark-Viverito, and to her right you have Dr. Singletary. She's the pastor of the Elmendorf Reformed Church. That's the successor to the Dutch Low Reformed Church, and also the deputy borough historian, Sharon Wilkins. And basically, there were three things that the task force wanted to reinforce. One was that this is a site of iconic and sort of a timeless place, and that should be memorialized in some way. Again, to talk about and reinforce the historical significance of this site, and also to foster a sense of place. In this image, you see a consecration ceremony where some of the remains were placed in boxes, and there was a consecration ceremony where prayers and all types of good spiritual words were said over the remains that were found over the site. The archaeological process was very, very extensive. Again, it ran companion and parallel to the work of the Harlem African Ground Task Force. Basically, it started when DOT, when they were rebuilding the Willis Avenue Bridge, their archaeologists found that there's a potential of remains on the site or nearby the site. So there was significant archaeological work done. In 2011, there was a phase 1 study done by the MTA. And in 2015, as I said, the MTA ceased its work on the site. What was found as a result of the archaeological work was they did not find any funereal or intact bodies on the site. But what they did find was some disarticulated remains, skeletal remains, which were found in the northeast quadrant of the site, closest to the river. It's their belief that the cemetery was probably disturbed as development ensued through the 1800s into the early 1900s, and that the found artifacts, the found souls, the remnants of the souls are being held in a safe and secure and climate-controlled place by AKRF. Ultimately, when all the remains are found, because the work is ongoing, the remains will be placed in the New York City Archaeological sort of repository, and that also is a very temperature control and safe and secure place as well. So in terms of the planning process, there was a vision, developing the vision. There's a lot of community outreach with this. From 2009 to 2015, there were a number of community meetings, both with the Harlem African Burial Ground Task Force as well as the Bus Depot Task Force. In 2016, there was an open house, sort of like an open house charrette. You can see the images before you that shows, photographs from that charrette. A lot of community dialogue and engagement, a lot of public engagement. And as a result of that effort, that forum got a Community Engagement Award from the Society of Historical Archaeology, the Mark E. Mack Community Engagement Award. So this, as you can see, community engagement, community participation, community involvement, and feedback was basically a very key element has driven this project up to this point and will continue to drive this project. These are the goals, the desired outcomes. One is to, as I've said, to establish a permanent cultural center and memorial, something that sort of pays homage to the African burial ground. Develop a mix of uses, affordable housing, mixed income housing, and also job-creating commercial uses. Enhance pedestrian and streetscape connections, and also to create a project that can be built, one that is financially feasible as well. After ULURP, EDC will issue an RFP. The RFP will basically have certain elements like urban design guidelines. There will be a protocol for the ongoing archaeological work regarding the African burial ground. It'll be used as a way to provide a development framework for developing the entire bus garage site as well as the African burial ground. You can see the development framework here. The memorial space will be about 18,000 square feet. It'll be open to the sky. Residential, about 730 units of housing, most of which will be affordable. Commercial, about 315,000 square feet. A mix of destination and local retail, and also an indoor cultural center to serve with the African burial ground, and also another community facility space that could be purposed for something else, and parking for 300 cars. Now, there are a number of requested actions that EDC, that the applicants are seeking. One is a zoning map amendment from M12 to C63. C63 is a general commercial district which allows under MIH a residential FAR of 8, a community facility FAR of 10, and a commercial FAR of 6. The C63 district would basically dragging the C63 district that was mapped as part of the East 125th Street project back in 2008. We're dragging that across the street to cover the proposed development site. A zoning text amendment to designate the project area as an MIH designated area. Option 1, which provides affordable housing for 25% of the residential floor area at 60% of AMI, which is roughly $45,000 a year. And option 2, which is 30% of residential floor area at 80% AMI, which is about $60,000 a year. That will be mapped across the entire project site. The city map amendment would demap this portion of 2nd Avenue so that it could be appended and be made of the entire project site. Again, the entire project site would have about 115,000 square feet. There will be easements mapped as well for sidewalks. And the disposition of city-owned property. The disposition would include the bus garage and the adjoining DMAP property. And DCAS is the applicant for the requested disposition action. A generic draft environmental impact statement was prepared for this project. The Office of the Deputy Mayor for Economic Development was the seeker lead for this. And the GDIS identified the following significant adverse impacts. The commission can see this on the image in front. Historic and cultural resources, which are archaeological, transportation, traffic, transit with the subways and pedestrians, and construction noise impacts. Also, as I said before, an RFP will be let after ULURP approvals are received to fashion and fine-tune the project and select the developer. This is an illustrative ground floor plan, and you can see the local retail on the ground floor. The parking is in here. There's residential above all of this. And you can see the memorial, which is open to the sky, 18,000 square feet, and a museum to serve the memorial located right here. And this is an illustrative plan showing what massing could look like. Again, residential on top of a commercial base, memorial open to the sky, a community facility which would operate in conjunction with the memorial, have a commemorative element in here, and other community facility space as well. With that, I'd like to end my presentation with the way this project began, with community. It began with community, it continues with the community. With that, that's my presentation, and I look forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you, Edward. Very comprehensive. Questions for Mr. Marshall? Let's not let that presentation go to waste. Commissioner Efron.
Thank you. It's an excellent presentation. Really appreciate it. It was complicated, but you made it seem very simple. I do have a question about the schematic you showed us and the massing. There's a part between the FDR and the project, which looks quite filled with trees, as has been photographed on the aerial photographs. Is there any concern about the shadow of the buildings on the north end and what will become of the two parts?
The short answer would be yes. Again, this is illustrative. This is not what the project will look like. But it gives you an idea of, with the different uses, how they could be masked within this project. The buildings may be lower than what we see here. We'll know after we craft urban design guidelines and the developer responds to that. But the short answer is that there would be some concerns about shadows on the parks, absolutely.
Commissioner Levin.
Yeah, Edwin, I'm glad you referred to community design guidelines. I have to say, this application comes to us at a kind of a different phase of detail, if you will, than we usually see. Usually, the city has put out an RFP, selected a developer. The developer has been part of the engagement with the community. There's been some push and some pull, and all the various pieces that need to get worked out, and we're shown schematics that, are able to satisfy us that this is where the memorial will be, this is what the shape of the building will be, the kinds of things that we're able then to build into the restrictive declaration, or the regulatory agreement that is part of the whole thing. Here we see none of that. So my question is how that kind of community engagement, which has become so important to successful projects getting through ULURP, how will that community engagement be assured? And how can we as planners know that we're making the right decisions here with, relatively little information compared to what we usually see.
Those are two
Why is the cart going before the horse here?
Those are two very good questions, and generally, the way, projects are advanced in the city is exactly the way you said it. In this area, it's a little different. You may recall that the area to the west was zone C63, and we're bringing the C63 across. We basically did the same thing for that project too. We had a very lengthy community engagement process. The speaker at the time, she wasn't the speaker, she was a council member at that time. And we produced an illustrative drawing as to what the project could look like. The RFP was released after that. However, the community was very much involved in terms of the vetting of that RFP. And the department was also heavily involved in terms of street wall, building designs, open space. And we were lucky with that because we had the urban renewal plan, and it was, so we could codify some of that in the urban renewal plan. So we did something very similar to that in 2008. With this project, we have a disposition of city-owned property, so definitely there's a mechanism in terms of looking at how we can codify certain things. But we'll definitely be working with EDC on the RFP, because that'll basically shape what the project will look like. The only absolute I can say at this point is that this area here has to remain open to the sky. This is set. This 18,000 is set. Everything else we'll discuss during the creation and vetting of the RFP.
Well, that obviously is a very important part, and I would note that the archaeological work is still ongoing, so
That's
we don't
correct.
even, we know there needs to be some place open to the sky, but we don't yet know even exactly precisely what shape it needs to be.
That's correct, that's correct. We do know that the footprint of the burial ground is that 18,000 square feet, and the archaeological work continues. No construction will take place until the archaeological work is completed. And that's also going to be laid out in the RFP as well.
Okay, but that's after we're done with it, so we all have to figure out how we play an appropriate planning role here. Just one follow-up question. Inasmuch as Commissioner Delauze is not here, I feel compelled to ask, what is the area median income in CD 11?
I should know, I'll get back to you.
Okay, because I think it's probably significantly less than the 80% AMI that is proposed on this site, and so then that begs a question about the affordable housing program that will be part of the RFP, and again, something that we all care a lot about, too.
Thank you. Other questions for Edwin? Okay, this is certified. Thank you, Edwin.
Thank you.
Let's now move to item number 7, page 209, proposed special permits to facilitate retail use in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District at 462 Broadway. Our presenter is Sylvia Lee, lead project planner from the Manhattan office. Item number 7, page 209.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a private application requesting the grant of 2 special permits. One special permit pursuant to Section 74781 of the zoning resolution, the good faith marketing special permit to allow retail use.
Sylvia, could you just speak into the mic closer? Thank you.
On portions of the ground floor and the cellar, and a second special permit pursuant to Section 74922 of the zoning resolution to allow a large retail establishment over 10,000 square feet in an existing six-story building located at 462 Broadway within an M15B zoning district in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, Manhattan Community District 2. So shown on this street view here is the building occupying the project site. Here is Broadway, and this is Grand Street. The delineated in red is currently vacant, and is where the proposed large retail establishment is proposed to be occupying. The building consists of 2 portions, as I'll reference in my presentation. the northern portion and the southern portion. Even though the two portions could be accessed and operated independently, historically, the two portions are occupied jointly, and the building has one certificate of occupancy. As shown on the area map, the site is located at a corner of Broadway and Grand Street. Here's the project site. Located within an M15B zoning district, the surrounding area is predominantly zoned as M15A and M15B districts, which permit light industrial and commercial uses as of right up to 5 FAR, and community facility uses up to 6.5 FAR. Residential use is not permitted as of right. In the M15B district, retail uses are not permitted as a right below the level of second story. And in M1 districts, certain retail stores over 10,000 square feet are not permitted as a right and require a special permit under Section 74.922. The project site is located in the Soho neighborhood along the major commercial corridor of Broadway. Once a primarily manufacturing area, over the years the area has evolved into a mixed-use district. Buildings within the vicinity of the project site, in particular ones along Broadway corridor, are typically loft buildings ranging from 5 to 7 stories and house retail establishments on the ground floor and commercial offices on the upper floors. Many other buildings have been converted to joint living workforce of artists, lofts, or use group 2 residential uses on the upper floors and have retail or other commercial uses at street level. Here are some photos of the project site. There's the building, Broadway, Grand Street. This is the Grand Street corridor. The existing 6-story building at 462 Broadway, as described in the 1973 Soho Cast Iron Historic District Report, was built around 1879 to 1880. And I quote, is a massive example of a cast iron commercial palace done in a French Renaissance theme. Until recently, the majority of the building, including the southern portion of the ground floor, and most of the upper floors were occupied by the International Culinary Center as a use group 9 trade school use, which is in conformance with the M15B use regulations. Due to changes of the Culinary Center's business model, in December 2015, the ICC eliminated its ground floor operation and consolidated its trade school and accessory office uses on the upper floors, vacated the southerly portion of the ground floor, second floor, and third floor, which are now vacant. The northern portion of the ground floor, as you can see here, this is an older photo, was occupied by non-conforming retail uses between 1998 to 2016, most recently by Joe Fresh, but has been vacant since May 2016. The applicant intends to pursue a separate land use application at a later time to allow retail use in the northerly portion of the ground floor, but it's not currently part of this land use application. Here's some more photos. You can see this is the Crosby Street frontage, where the service entrances are located. This is Crosby Street looking north. The applicant, as shown on the site plan, the zoning lot of the project site measures approximately 20,127 square feet and has about 100 feet of frontage on Broadway, as well as on Crosby Street, and about 200 feet of frontage on Grand Street. The northern and southern portion of the building, again, could be accessed separately. So this is the northern portion, which is not part of this application. The southern portion could be accessed through both Broadway and Crosby Street entrances. The existing building contains approximately 117,274 square feet of floor area and an FAR of 5.8. The applicant proposes to use the southerly ground floor, southerly second floor, and southerly third floor for commercial retail uses, and tenant the space with a single use group 6 and 10A large retail establishment of approximately 28,600 634 square feet. Showed here, the blue area is the use waiver associated with the good faith marketing special permit, and the red dotted area is waivers associated with the large retail special permit. Specifically, the entire cellar, approximately 16,567 gross square feet of the cellar, 8,668 square feet on the ground floor, 9,983 square feet on the second floor, as well as the same square footage on the third floor, which are currently vacant, would be reoccupied by a single retail establishment. As proposed, going back to the site plan, here you can see the proposed retail entrance. Loading and unloading would happen on Crosby Street. Goods could be delivered into the retail store using the service entrances and could be delivered to the cellar using the freight elevator existing in the building. Section 74781 allows the Commission to modify the use regulations of the M15B district to allow retail use below the level of second story, provided that certain findings regarding the owner's marketing efforts could be made. Prior to the filing of the application for a period of over a year, the applicant pursued marketing efforts to rent the subject ground floor and cellar space for conforming uses. According to the applicant, despite these efforts, there had been no inquiries or requests for long-term use of the vacant space for as of right heavy commercial or light manufacturing uses. A detailed documentation of the applicant's marketing efforts is provided in the applicant's statement of findings, and there are also sample marketing materials. Section 74922 allows the Commission to modify the use regulations of the M1 districts to permit certain retail establishments over 10,000 square feet, provided the following findings relevant to this application could be made. Again, the applicant's statement of findings is associated with this special permit is included in your packages. Please also note that staff has been received of emails from community members opposing this application. Staff received approximately 35 emails as of today. And that's it for the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sylvia. Questions? Commissioner Manin, then Commissioner Levin, Commissioner Esser.
My question is not to Sylvia, but basically to the department. I know we had a conversation about these special permits and 74, 780, 781, and the department studying a different route to these type of actions. Do we know where the department is at this point with that?
Anybody speak to that?
Okay. So as Carl previously mentioned at review sessions and public hearings, that the department would be working with the Manhattan Borough President's Office and Councilmember Margaret Chin's office to pursue a study for the Soho-NoHo area. And so far, we've finished the research data collection phase of the study, and we've shared some of the findings with the Borough President's Office and Councilmember Chin's office. But so far, I guess there's discussion pending with regards to next steps for the study.
The only other thing I would add is, as you all know, we are going through a transition, so we're going to wait for the new chair to be in place, and sort of, since the study has not yet started, we'll be briefing her on this and then can update you on where we go with it.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, Commissioner Levin?
Well, Commissioner Marin has obviously asked the most important question here is we all know there are problems with this special permit format, and the sooner we can pay attention to it, the better, although I know it is not a fun project at all. But this one really highlights the problem. A little online research reveals a 10-page, full color brochure advertising this as 45,000 square feet available in Soho's largest continuous block of corner retail space. They are right now advertising this as large retail space. I found, that's on 462broadway.com. I found another listing for office live workspace at $385 a foot. No mention of manufacturing. So my question is how we can even entertain this application with those kinds of marketing efforts pending. It can't be the case that you can simultaneously market it for manufacturing and office and retail.
Thank you for bringing this to our attention. I know this is an issue that had happened before with regards to other land use applications. So staff have been advising applicants that during the good faith marketing period, no marketing efforts should be made to concurrently market the space for retail. And according to the applicant, no such retail marketing efforts have been made, and staff have been periodically checking websites for such marketing, but I apologize if that's something that was not
Well, you know, maybe,
discovered.
I just found this poking around yesterday afternoon when I was doing my homework.
Right.
So, you know, maybe you look into it and discover something that wasn't apparent. But if it is an active proposal on behalf of the landlord, I think we ought to at least defer certification until we understand what the current state of their marketing effort is.
Great.
Well,
Thank
Sylvia,
you.
did you say that representations had been made that there was no marketing of the site being done presently?
Yes, according to the applicant. And I haven't checked,
Other than manufacturing?
yes, other than manufacturing, yeah.
I'm in kind. It's right here,
Right, no, I understand.
10 pages.
I don't think anything has been made in writing, but staff have had meetings with the applicant, in particular with regards to this issue. I could also follow up and provide more information to the commission after the review session.
Okay. All right, you want to raise that? Commissioner Efron? Okay. That's a good point.
We'll follow up. The applicant provided some additional information. We'll follow up with the commission after the review session.
Okay. Commissioner Besser?
Thank you. Mine was pretty much along those lines. I just had a specific question related to section 74, 781. There was no mention of internet advertising, you know, being included in that section, and I thought it's kind of the way that, you know, most brokers and, you know, salespeople go, is advertising on the internet.
Right.
Accurately, of course, but, so thank you.
The broker's effort may have included internet marketing. We'll follow up with the applicant.
I was actually speaking about that section
Oh,
itself.
the text? Yeah.
It goes hand in hand, but the
Yeah.
section doesn't include advertising in the newspaper and others.
Commissioner Cantor?
Thank you. Is the material that you found, is it inappropriate to have been on the internet at this point of time, or is it just indelicate?
The applicant has represented that the advertising that you saw was posted after the good faith marketing period had ended, and the applicant said he would provide, the applicant's representative said they would provide us the date of, the end date of the good faith marketing period. But at this point, I don't have that date.
Well, I think their materials say February 12th, 2016, which is not all that long ago.
Thank you.
And besides that, I don't buy that. I mean, look, they're applying for permission to do something that is not currently allowed by zoning. They know they have to go through this process. How can it be good faith if before this application is even presented to this commission and the public review process has begun, they start the effort for a use that is currently contrary to zoning? Doesn't make me very happy about entertaining this application.
I recommend that we get more information from the applicant with specifics on the advertising, when it was posted, et cetera, and we can make the decision.
Good idea.
Going from there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anita, could I confer with you for a second? All right, so we'll hold this over pending further information. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Any other questions for Sylvia? Were you done?
I have the next item.
Yeah, that's Spring Street, right? Okay, before we proceed with Spring Street, Commissioners, I want to bring something to your attention. Due to an administrative error, which is seldom made here at DCP, I'm sure, the department is recertifying the proposed zoning map and text amendment affiliated with 451 Franklin Avenue in Brooklyn, a project that was previously certified on January 30th. You will recall this being a mixed-use project in Community Board 9 in Brooklyn. Unfortunately, the paperwork didn't catch up with the certification. So essentially, we are restarting the certification process. All right?
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
1451 Franklin for the record.
What did I say?
451.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Commissioner Dweck. Thank you for your usual punctilious attention to detail.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank
Now
you.
we'll move to item number 8, page 260, Manhattan pre-hearing application with respect to proposed zoning text amendment to facilitate expansion of commercial ground floors within Area A of the Special Little Italy District, and our presenter is Sylvia.
5557 Spring Street is a private application returning as a pre-hearing item after review by Manhattan Community Board 2 and Manhattan Borough President. CB2 recommends its approval of the application. We're still waiting to get the recommendation from the Borough President. We'll pass it along probably today or early tomorrow morning. This private application, as you may recall, is for an amendment to the Special Little Italy District map to facilitate the rear expansion of the ground floors of 2 existing mixed-use buildings located at 5557 Spring Street within the Special Little Italy District in a C62 zoning district, Manhattan Community District 2. Here's the project site. It's in Preservation Area A, immediately west of the Area A1, the Mulberry Street corridor. As shown on the area map, the project site is located mid-block between Lafayette Street and Mulberry Street on the north side of Spring Street. The surrounding neighborhood is characterized by residential and mixed-use tenements dating from the 1820s into the mid-1920s, generally ranging from 4 to 7 stories in height. Many of the tenements were built with ground floor retail space and are currently occupied commercially as well. Shown in asterisk in red are retail uses at street level. As you can see, Mulberry Street is lined with retail uses, as well as this stretch of Spring Street, which has a continuous retail frontage. The project site includes 2 existing buildings shown here. built around 1871. Both buildings are 5 stories in height, have an FAR of about 3.4, with ground floor commercial and residential above. The 2 buildings have a total of 33 residential units, 28 of which are occupied, and includes 7 rent-regulated units in total. As shown in the photo at the bottom, the ground floor are commercially occupied. The ground floor of 55 Spring Street is occupied by 2 bakeries. The ground floor of 57 Spring Street is occupied by a Fresha cosmetic retail store. As a reminder, I'll talk about the difference between Area A and Area A1 regulations in a little bit. So here are the 2 buildings. As you can see, it's immediately located west of Area A1, which is the Mulberry Street corridor, in the Area A preservation area. The regulations of these 2 sub-areas are substantially similar, except that Area A1, the Mulberry Street regional spine, as highlighted here in blue, prioritizes commercial uses, and for example, allows ground floors that are commercially occupied to fully cover a lot. Whereas in Area A, lot coverage for interior lots are limited to 60% throughout the building. As shown on the illustrative site plan, both buildings currently have a non-complying lot coverage of almost 70%, which cannot be increased under Area A regulations. The shaded in gray are the existing rear yards. As shown in the illustrative floor plan, the applicant proposes to enlarge existing ground floors in both buildings into the rear to fully cover their respective lots. The ground floor of 55 Spring Street would be enlarged by approximately 891 gross square feet, whereas the ground floor of 57 Spring Street would be enlarged by 856 gross square feet. As shown on the illustrative sections, each enlargement would be a single story, rising to a height about 15 feet and occupied by conforming commercial uses pursuant to the Area A1 regulations. To facilitate expansion of the commercial ground floors to full lot coverage, the applicant seeks to amend Appendix A of Article 10, Chapter 9, Special Little Italy District Map, to extend the boundary of Area A1, here shown more clearly, towards Lafayette Street by 50 feet to a depth of 120 feet, to include the 2 buildings at 55, 57 Spring Street. The application was referred out to Manhattan Community Board 2 and Manhattan Board President on October 17th, 2016. At its full board meeting on February 16th, the Community Board 2 adopted a unanimous resolution recommending denial of the application. You should find it in a separate package in front of you. The Community Board's recommendation cites concerns about intensifying retail uses on Spring Street, growing conflict between commercial uses and residential uses in the neighborhood, and other issues, including the building's DOB filings, deregulation of previously rent-regulated units, and impacts of construction on existing building tenants. The applicant submitted a series of letters to the Community Board during their review, which are also included in the package, summarizing the rationale of the proposed text amendment and responding to some of the community concerns. In the correspondences, the applicant expressed willingness to commit to prohibiting eating and drinking establishments with hard liquor license and not combining the retail spaces in the 2 buildings to form a larger retail space. The applicant also proposes a building management plan to mitigate potential construction impacts on tenants, and also clarified that among the 28 existing tenants, 23 expressed support for the proposed development and 4 opposed the proposal. The applicant further clarified the conditions in the rear yard and will be able to speak to it further tomorrow, and how the proposed enlargement would not block any actively used lot line windows in the adjacent buildings. That's it for the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. Questions? Commissioner Levin?
I have just one, not like the last time. Do we happen to know the one dwelling unit that's to be eliminated, the vacant one on the ground floor? Do we happen to know if it was rent regulated? Is it listed with DHCR?
Not that I'm aware of. I know the Borough President's Office is seeking confirmation from DHCR now, and the applicant
Okay, maybe the applicant can come
would
prepared
provide,
to
yes,
confirm to us that it's not.
yes. Yeah, so far, according to the applicant's statement, that unit is not rent regulated.
Good to know. Thank you.
Other questions for Sylvia? Okay, this is on for public hearing tomorrow.
Thank you.
So Commissioners, let's now go to the future votes discussion. Tomorrow, there will be one public hearing, which is what Sylvia just presented. In addition, favorable resolutions have been prepared for the following. The Red Hook Initiative, which involves a special use permit in Community District 6, Brooklyn. The Caton Flats proposal, which is the disposition of city-owned property and a zoning map change to facilitate a mixed-use development with affordable housing. We have the Coney East map minor change, which is an administrative change to split a previously approved city map into two parts to facilitate a phased development in Coney Island, Brooklyn. We have the West 23rd Street text amendment, which involves a transfer of floor area across the zoning lots. We have the St. Patrick's Cathedral parking, a single parking space on the campus of St. Patrick's Cathedral. We have Teleport Site A, which involves proposed disposition of city-owned property for commercial development. We have 115 and 119 Downs Avenue, which involves a future zoning lot subdivision to the special South Richmond Development District. We have we have Ionia and Edgegrove Avenues, which involves future subdivision within the special South Richmond Development District. And we have 246 Flag Place, which is proposed modification of topography to facilitate expansion of an existing home in the special natural area district of Staten Island. So moving on to 2 weeks out, March 8th, staff will be preparing favorable resolution for the Friends of Crown Heights 29 Child Care Center, proposed continued use of that daycare center in Community District 8, Brooklyn. We have a 210-214 Hegeman Avenue proposal, which is a UDAP disposition special permit to facilitate affordable housing in the community of Brownsville in Brooklyn. Just note that the 95 Evergreen Avenue proposal was an office space proposal concerning 160,000 square feet for HRA facility. That was, we were supposed to have a hearing tomorrow. That application has been withdrawn. We have next the Rose Castle proposal, which involves a series of land use actions to facilitate development, including affordable housing in Community District 3, Brooklyn. With respect to this project, you just received a letter from the applicant responding to some of the previously raised concerns by the commission. And we have Winston and Amy here to walk us through the letter for your consideration.
So, good afternoon, Commissioners. You just received a letter that the department received this morning from the applicant's representatives, and it walks you through their consideration of the Commission's concerns about applying the workforce option for the Rose Castle development. The letter begins with a summary of the project. As a reminder, it's almost 300 units of housing, a rezoning in the Bedford-Stuyvesant community of Brooklyn. 88 units of that development are projected to be affordable under the mandatory inclusionary housing program. And the actions are rezoning and the mandatory inclusionary housing text amendment. The applicant's representatives walks through the consideration of the workforce option in its design and development in the Commission's report on mandatory inclusionary housing. He notes that the CPC report states that markets support new construction here, but not high enough to cross-subsidize low-income housing. That was the rationale for the workforce option. And that the workforce option was appropriate, according to the Commission's report, for emerging and mid-market areas. In the consideration, the Commission noted that moderate income markets would require subsidy for low-income housing because the market was not strong enough. And one of the advantages of the workforce option was that it reserved subsidies, sorely needed subsidies for other neighborhoods where that housing could not be built, such as in lower income neighborhoods, and also maintains moderate income housing units in areas such as middle income areas as that neighborhood emerges. In high markets, of course, there is cross-subsidy, and in low markets, such as the Commission did in East New York, HBD city subsidies help low-income housing be possible there. It then walks us through the market conditions, the BAE report that establishes the different markets and defines what is a mid-market. In that case, then going to the NTAs, the neighborhood tabulation areas that make up the moderate category, and then going directly to the Bedford NTA, which is the neighborhood that this application, the subject application, is geographically located in, albeit at the edge. And using the census information and the ACS data, establishes that rents they expect or stipulate that median gross rent here is about $1,187, which they consider to be moderate. And they conclude with testimony from Commissioner Bean at the City Council that the workforce option is an important option because it allows for unsubsidized housing, permanent affordable housing to be built, and was an important part of the mandatory inclusionary housing program. They summarize and conclude that 88 units would be created as a result of this permanent affordable housing, that a consultant had reviewed the project and determined that options 1 and 2, the lower income options, would require public subsidy, would not be financially feasible on its own without subsidy. And then they point out that the incomes would be, according to the MIH program, up to 70% of AMI for 5% of the units, and that half of those units would be marketed to CD3, which is HBD's policy so far. So we wanted to discuss this with you. We'll hear from the Commission what your thoughts were on this, and we also have others here to answer your questions about that part.
So Winston, this proposal has not been put formally before HPD, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. Questions? Commissioner Efron?
I haven't had a chance to read this at all closely, but I'm confused because they quote Commissioner Bean from the MIH hearing, and even she says that the workforce option as an option that the City Council could choose to impose on a particular neighborhood. So isn't it at the option of the City Council with advice from this commission and not something that a developer can choose to adopt?
Absolutely, right? So it is certainly up. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we wanted to point out, and Howard has a friendly amendment to that.
But just I can't pass up an opportunity to come back and talk about the mandatory inclusionary housing. Good afternoon. I just wanted to clarify that it's sort of both, right? That the council will vote and attach to the area, make available within the area whichever options from the program it determines to be appropriate. Of that menu that's printed at the time of approval of the land use action, the developer then can choose one of the options on the menu, right, at the time of development. So there is a list of options that are made available to the developer from which the developer chooses. The list may consist of one option, it may consist of more than one option.
And the commission has an equal part in this as well.
Or even if going to the council straight away, if the council determines what's on the menu.
Yeah, ultimately, this is different from other actions where, you know, when the commission approves something, either it's in scope or out of scope. This is the program that has been adopted, and the council may elect to apply whichever of the options at its discretion at that stage of the process.
Other questions? Commissioner Cerullo?
It's a technical question for sure, but it's procedural in nature. Just want to understand this, because I remember paying a great deal of attention to this part of the process. And actually, it's not a part of the process that I particularly think is a great one, which is why my ears are, I'm listening even more carefully to this. Just to get the process down, the applicant, since all these options exist in the text, the whole scoping issue is really not an issue, right? But the applicant does get to select the option or options they would like to proceed with.
Right.
And that's
In their application, in their
their
zoning
app-
text amendment application, they
Correct.
request that
Request.
these options be made
correct.
available.
They get the opportunity to, for whatever reason, whether it's financial or just they woke up one day,
Right.
they threw a dart at the wall, they get to pick the one or more, although workforce needs to be coupled with another option.
That's correct.
But they get to pick that. Once, and then there's lots of discussions, behind the scenes before certification, but once certification occurs, all bets are off. That's what I call it, because at that point, we can change the options in our process, whether it's because of public input or because we believe the applicant is wrong, or whatever. And of course, the council can also change, whether we had or not, they can change it too. And everyone is working from the palette of A, B, and workforce options.
And,
really, for
and
the
deep
most.
affordability. There was a fourth one that was added.
Oh, right.
Following the commission's
Correct,
report. Yeah,
correct,
that's
correct.
correct.
I'm in my, I didn't get there and back.
Right.
And so that's a correct, am I basically, am I saying anything incorrectly? Is what I'm saying.
I will say it again in,
Even if
in
you may
maybe
frame
slightly
it
different
differently.
words, but essentially the ideas are all consistent. The applicant will describe, and just as they describe, we propose the following development and these actions to facilitate them. They propose a set of options that they believe would facilitate their proposed,
Agreed.
whatever they're proposing. And then the commission considers considers the application in its entirety, and as does the council. I would say that, in the commission report, the commission laid out the broad terms by which it found, in general, the options 1 and 2 to be appropriate generally, and then under certain circumstances,
Agreed.
The workforce option potentially to be appropriate as well. The fourth option, the deep affordability option, was added following the report. But the idea is that, based on consideration of the land use issues at stake in the neighborhood and the broad characteristics that are described in the commission's consideration, the commission will vote on the application, and then it goes to the council, and the council will vote on the application.
And I didn't mean to oversimplify all of that. I guess to sort of flip the point, the discussion that just took place, which was whether or not the council was selecting the program that then the applicant was moving through the process. That's what I heard, and it sounded like that was being affirmed to some degree or not clarified, that there may be discussions with a council member by an applicant early in the process, before certification, and all the pre-discussion that smart applicants would want to have with their elected officials in their community. But really, it's not at that point in the process, pre-certification to certification, it's not technically the council member providing the menu, it's the applicant, but the council definitely has the opportunity at the end of the process to flip the whole thing on its head if they so wish.
Right, I don't think we were making any representation about what kind of conversations the applicant
no,
has
I
prior
was-
to.
I
Yeah,
was-
this is all about what happens, the order is the applicant
order.
presents a proposal.
Okay.
It begins the public review process, the commission, and then the council.
Okay, got it. Okay, I just wanted to, thank you. I got nervous for a minute. Does that
Okay,
make sense?
any other questions? Commissioner Levin?
To figure out the right way to ask this. At the previous review session, our former chair advised us that staff believed that options 1 or 2 should apply. And I guess my question is whether that's still the case. I mean, it's hard for us, I mean, we need to go home and look at these numbers and poke them around, and I wonder if you've had the opportunity to do that, and if you have any advice for us.
I think
You first.
we still believe that options 1 and 2 are good options here. The applicant certainly has provided us with additional information, and we've discussed this internally. We would like to suggest to the commission that the commission encourage the applicant in its report to engage with HPD on whether or not one of those 2 options is possible at the end of this process at the city council. There are more than one site. There are 2 sites here. Whether it's possible to entertain one of those options at a later date.
Commissioner Efferon?
Is this precedent setting in any way for other applicants in the pipeline now? So that, do you see a trend towards more workforce housing being requested? Is there anything we should be aware of?
I won't speak to the trend among applicants, which the borough officers would be maybe more familiar with. But I think the issue here is this, to the extent that the conditions resemble what the commission envisioned when it approved the text amendment for the mandatory inclusionary housing program, that there are conditions under which is desirable to sustain the ability to produce housing without subsidy while ensuring long-term affordability, permanent affordability, affirmative marketing practices, all of the various factors that go into an inclusionary housing development, that if that condition exists, then the workforce option may be appropriate, given those factors, which have been considered generically in the prior report. In terms of, there's nothing here that would broaden that concept in any way or narrow it. I think the idea is if those conditions are present, then this would be consistent with the rationale for making it an option.
So between now and the 8th of March, will we be getting any more?
It sounds as though staff will be preparing a favorable resolution with the caveat mentioned by Winston that the applicant engage HPD. Strongly encourages, we'll use, some very strong language in the consideration section of the report. But at the end of the day, it appears that a favorable report will be prepared for this project.
Okay, any other questions?
So, Mr. Vice Chairman, we just have two more items. We have the 901 Manor Road, which involves a proposed zoning map amendment to establish a commercial overlay in Staten Island. And we have the United Nations Hotel first floor interior, which is a landmark designated by LPC. In this instance, staff is unaware of any conflicts with the zoning resolution, projected plans, or projects for the area involved. And that would be it for the day.
All righty. So we'll see everyone hopefully tomorrow,
Thank you.
10 a.m.